And if we can call to order, and the invocation will be done by Dr. B. Theron Williams, presiding bishop of the Churches of One Accord and Kingdom Reign Church. Please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Welcome, welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's good to see you, Mr. Mayor, and this wonderful panel of civic leaders. The slate is full in this city, as we can see. So I just want to confer blessings on the mayor, the city council, the city attorney, city clerk, city manager, that you all would carry our burden for us. So we're in the city, and this is a heavy burden that we're going to lift in this city in the coming years. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you. We thank you for another opportunity to gather in the people's building to conduct the people's work. You've given us a gift in this city of Virginia Beach, our shorelines, our beautiful panoramic views. You've given us some of the best and the brightest people that come into this community. You've given us leaders that are after your heart. We pray for them as we open up this session of council. We pray for their wisdom. We pray for their knowledge and their understanding as they would tackle the issues and the ordinances of this great city that you've given us. The word of the Lord says, when the righteous rules, the people rejoices. It also says, righteousness exalts a nation. We declare that this is a righteous city. We declare that the Lord has given us righteous leaders and righteous leadership to orchestrate the affairs of residents who are truly the best and the brightest. We come and we go in this city and we pray that the charge that we've given you through elections and appointments, that you would provide for us the leadership, cause us to be one, unify this city through your wisdom, through your competency, through your skills, through your abilities to make this city a better city. We thank you for the residents. We pray as they have their communal affairs. We pray that when they come into this place, we pray that they would give themselves to the proper protocol, that they would respect their neighbor even when they have differences with their neighbor. We pray that they would seek compromise, that they would seek fairness and justice, and that we would learn to live with the rulings that these whom we have elected to represent us. We thank you in this wonderful hour for Virginia Beach is rising, and the eyes of the nation is upon this wonderful city that you have given this stewardship to of so many people. Bless them, bless their families, bless the mayor, the city council, the city constitutional officers. Allow them to understand that you have given them the capacity to rise above their own proclivities and meet in an atmosphere of peace, of righteousness, of joy, that this city, though we are made up of many colors, ethnicities, backgrounds, and walks of life, We declare justice in this city. Amen.
All righty. Could I get a motion on the certification to close session, please?
So moved. Second.
Okay, vote's open.
By a vote of 10-0, Mr. Moss abstaining. Did you?
I meant to say aye. I
Okay,
apologize.
thank you. By a vote of 11-0, you have certified the closed session to be in accordance with the motion to recess.
Okay, could I get a approval of the minutes of the informal and formal sessions of August 6, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
Vote's open.
By a vote of 11-0, you've approved the minutes as submitted.
Okay, at this point, it's that time of year where, once again, we welcome King Neptune and the court right here in our council chambers. And we'd like to bring Mr. Robert Browerman and the court, Kim and Pat Schuler, celebration chairman, please come forward. We got them coming solo.
So, I know, my better half, I don't know what she's doing. So anyways, Honorable Mayor, fellow council members, thank you very much for allowing us to come for this tradition of presenting the court. So this year, we have Court 46 that I'm presenting to you as representatives of not only the Neptune Festival, but I promise you, great ambassadors of the city of Virginia Beach and everything that we are and everything that we celebrate. So with that, if I may, Princess, we're going to start with the princesses. Princess Jalea Branch. Princess Lindsay Branch. Princess Sarah Bimson. Princess Caroline Dixon. Princess Catherine Harriman. Princess Catherine Hobbs. Princess Lindsay Locke. Princess Demay Malvin. Princess Maura Nacy. Princess Jackie Sable. And Princess Holly Spate.
Welcome.
Now for your Tritons. Triton Adam Carroll with Wilcock Rivers Gates. Triton Tony Di Silvestro with Why Not Italian. Triton Jim Kibler with Virginia Natural Gas. Triton Fred Napolitano III with Napolitano Homes. Triton Doug Russell with Core Assurance Partners, Inc. Triton Lou Shager with Mosquito Joe. And two members who are not here tonight, Triton Brad Foster with Atlantic Home Care Services, and Triton Graham Herbert with JB Morgan Chase. And last but not least, your king, King Robert A. Browerman and Lady Renee. Have at it.
Welcome one, welcome all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city leadership. It's a real honor to be here. On behalf of Renee and I, we're both lifelong residents of this wonderful city, and it is a truly exciting honor to be representing the city in this role. Behind you, you see some of today's leaders in this city, one of the finest collection that I've gotten to know. It's been a real honor to meet them and their ladies and to see how they contribute to the business community, to various charities, and to the social fabric at large in the city of Virginia Beach. And also behind me, you see the future generation of future leaders in this city. They've already accomplished so much, in their young lives. And if my casual observations are any indication, our future is in good hands with future leaders like this. So thank you very much for your leadership of this amazing city. It's been a tough year for our city, but we will continue to work hard. I know you will as well, and we'll continue to prove why this is one of the best cities in the world to work, live, and to play. So on behalf of Renee and I and the entire court, we thank you. And Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I'd love to present each one of you with one of the King's coins, and then we'll let you get back to your business.
That would be an honor. Thank you. Give a bunch of our city treasurer. Thank you. Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. We'll do our best to make you proud.
And looking forward to a great season with all of you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving along to public hearings. Item number 1, exchange of excess city property, a residual of the site of 1416 Kempsville Road. Any speakers?
Yes, sir. The first speaker is Conrad Shizventer.
Welcome, Conrad.
Those aren't drinks in those things, are they? Now, I do like when government can serve to protect land, and this particular piece of land, rather small and left over as a scrap from Kempsville Road improvements, no longer has defined public need, and due to the immediate surroundings of a 7-Eleven, a major roadway, an Applebee's, an Aldi's, open spacing, it appears somewhat fruitless, so I endorse declaring it in excess of city needs and let it be absorbed by surrounding properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Barbara Messner.
Welcome.
You know, if y'all could put those things down too, it's easy for us to see you. Everybody else put those gifts down. Yeah, I'm opposed to exchanging and giving away excess property and right-of-ways. I think the city needs to maintain as many properties as possible, because a lot of these excess properties are needed for right-of-ways. And as I said, I oppose the exchange and doing away with city properties, because we don't have that many properties left. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the speakers, sir.
Okay, the next one is item number 2 under public hearings, polling place change, central absentee voter precinct at Municipal Center 2577 Central Drive.
The first speaker is Reed Greenman, and then the second speaker is Barbara Messner.
Welcome, Reed.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, City Manager, City Attorney. I'm going to talk a little bit more about process tonight and the way you do things. When I saw this on the agenda, I came here tonight to speak on the raises. But since I'm here, I thought I would go over the agendas or something else to talk about. So I looked into each item. And imagine my surprise to find out that a lease has already been signed on this property, and we've already moved forward with this, but tonight is the public hearing where you want our input on whether or not we should move the polling place from the municipal center out into the middle of Oceana West, not even serviced by any public transit in the middle of nowhere. So I was at work, Michelle went out there and investigated, we looked at the property, I counted 58 parking places, which is inadequate. I came up with 14 questions, which I sent to the voter registrar's office, Barbara. And she was very nice and provided me the answers she could, but she didn't have all the answers. Some of the questions were, well, how many people use our facility? Is this a prudent place to go? What did you do to make the decision to relocate voters from being able to come in there and do absentee voting here in the municipal center to the middle of nowhere? Well, that was all handled by facilities. Facilities were not kind enough to return any answers to my questions because, again, I didn't have a lot of notice. So it's interesting to note that there's a massive trend on the increase of people that are actually doing this pre-registered voting and that come in person. I asked, why are we doing this? And the issue was they just simply outgrew the space. But we're going to sign a 10-year lease at $20,500 a month, and yet we pay nothing for building 14 today? That seems like an exorbitant amount of money. I talked with Al Ablowich out there, and he said, well, that's kind of a market rate. With all the empty space we have in the city, I would think that you could, find a better deal than that, than a brand new building that was just put up for this, which, by the way, isn't ready. So I guess my point to you is, as a entity, if you want our input, this process is backwards. Before you sign a lease and make the decision and then have us come up here to give you input on what our opinion is, was there any effort to find out if that was convenient to people to go to sign up to vote? If it's not serviced by public transit, what's going to happen to those people? And it really is out in the middle of nowhere. So given all the things the city manager's doing with Building 2 and Building 11 and relocating the police, it seems like a perfect opportunity to do that within the municipal center. But we'll never know because you've already made the commitment for at least 10 years. I hope in the future we could do better and there'd be a little more intellectual curiosity to investigate these types of decisions. They do affect elections, and there's a massive increase. So
Thank you very much.
we should do better.
Barbara Messner.
Good evening. I actually posted the agenda online for people to see, and I highlighted this, and I tried to do research. And it seems like that land which is in the jet noise zone, you have the steel chainsaw, which y'all have subsidized, I don't know how many times. Could you not text while I'm talking, Mr. Moss, please?
Taking notes on what you're saying, ma'am.
It's recorded. Okay. It's just really rude.
Miss
Okay, I'm trying to talk. It's distracting when y'all talk amongst yourselves. Okay, I did the research, and it looks like it's either Tallheimer or DeVaris. I don't know which property. The Sabre Street property is Seabury, which is Collins, and there is available property for all these. Everyone, you're moving everything out of City Hall so you can start your groundbreaking and your Taj Mahal for yourself. Yeah, I tried to call Ms. Shortridge. She usually gives me information I need. Ms. Shortridge, Ms. Gibson, and Christine were all absent today. I called the State Board of Elections to find out if this is temporary or permanent and why only 2.5 months. You know, the polling station shouldn't be changed 2.5 months before any election. And person for State Board of Election conveniently isn't there either. There is no due process. None of these changes should be made without advertising 2 full months in advance for everything. And the other problem is, you know, all these special elections. There's an election all the time now. People step down, then you appoint somebody. And yeah, absentee is really important, and I don't think that that you should vote to move this. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the speakers are on that item.
Okay, thank you. And then public hearing number 3, Transportation Alternatives Set Aside Program, application to VDOT pedestrian and bicycle enhancements.
The first speaker is Conrad Schisventer, and the second speaker is Barbara Messner.
Welcome back.
I like to look forward and often planning my days and weeks. City council typically operates on a longer schedule, the group planning years and decades hence. A hallmark of federalism, the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, STBC, assists state and local transportation decisions by providing funding for unique projects. A set funding amount is under Virginia's Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program, used for smaller and non-traditional transportation projects. And as an understander of modern monetary theory, Virginia Beach here is asking for money to assist in 5 projects. They applied to Richmond to get it. Richmond got it from Washington. It's a great idea to me, and I'd like to lobby you guys to apply for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Barbara Messner.
Good evening. Yeah, we need to work on VDOT and Hampton Roads Transit. They failed. You know, there are plenty of us that used to speak out in 2000 about the problems with basic transportation. All we need is basic transportation. There's so much money wasted. There were two buses. One that HRT has the wraparound ad. I don't know where that money's going. For Ocean Breeze, that was speeding on Pacific Avenue. A second one with the vodka ad. I don't think this is appropriate because their children see these ads. That was speeding 50, 60 miles an hour down Pacific Avenue. I think we need to address all the problems with VDOT and Hampton Roads Transit because the pedestrians and bicyclists aren't safe if you look at the accidents. You're mixing speeding scooters, bikes, skateboards are allowed on the sidewalk. I wish instead of making notes, you would come down to the beach sometime, Mr. Moss, and look at what really goes on with me.
Please
Thank you.
stay on.
I am on the topic. Thank you. Thank you. I am on the topic. I'm on the topic of pedestrian and bicycle enhancements because I've addressed these for years. When Barry Frankenfield was at Parks and Rec, and I addressed the fact that we didn't have safe bike paths. We still don't have safe bike paths, and I don't think the Norfolk Southern is affordable in the right place for people because we still have crime. Thank you.
I follow speaker, sir.
Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Vice Mayor, could we do the consent agenda?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, under ordinances resolution, I move the following items be placed on the consent agenda. On ordinances resolution, item 7C, ordinance to accept and appropriate $1,104,721 in federal pass-through surplus and $276,180 in state surplus for the Virginia Department of Transportation Highway Infrastructure Program to Capital Project 2-049 Centerville Turnpike Phase 2 and transfer $1,380,901 Capital Project 2-110 Nemo Parkway Phase 7B.
Okay, now we're going to have the special on planning,
So it's public hearing.
public hearing on planning.
Under planning, items K4, David W. and Kimberly B. Lee for a street closure regarding one half of an unimproved unnamed alley adjacent to the rear of 617 South Atlantic Avenue in the Beach District. 5, John E. and Jennifer K. Alex for a street closure regarding one half of an unimproved unnamed alley adjacent to the rear of 536 Vanderbilt Avenue in the Beach District. Number 8, K.I. Kennels LLC, Karen Brumley Pool for conditional use permit regarding commercial kennel at 6444 Knott's Island Road in the Princess Anne District. So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any discussion? We have a motion second. Votes open.
There were speakers for planning.
By a vote of 11-0, you approve the consent agenda as read by the Vice Mayor.
Okay. All right, we're going to move down to planning. Item K1. Okay. You want to do? Okay, my apologies. All right, ordinance number 1. Ordinance to amend section 10-1 of the city code to change the polling location, RA absentee voting to 577 Central Drive.
We have two speakers. The first speaker is Barbara Messner, and the second speaker is Andrew Jackson.
Good evening. Now, I've already spoken on this, and if you'll notice the agenda, under public hearing, it says Central Absentee Voter Precinct at Municipal Center, 2577 Central Drive. And under ordinance, it doesn't say at the Municipal Center. It says amend Section 10.1 of the City Code to change polling location to raise central absentee voting. With all the problems we've had with elections and everything, I just, I'm speaking out. Most of us know what you're going to do. You've made up your mind before we come up here. But it isn't due process, and there's no way you should be moving it 2.5 months before the election. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Jackson.
Welcome, Andrew.
Good evening. I guess everyone has said everything that they need to say about this moving the polling place, except one. I don't know if this is a form of voter suppression or not, but I gotta ask that question. We have a number of folks that I know of that use public transportation to get where they go. A large number of those folks come, if you go and watch them when they're doing the absentee voting, there's numbers of folks. Now, I would like, since you've made this decision without at least my input, why don't you make another decision without my input and provide transportation for all these folks that need to get to the polling place? How will you do that? Otherwise, they don't have the opportunity that others have. Now, you can call it discrimination, you can call it voter suppression, I don't care what you call it, but it's wrong. I've heard all the other things that people said, but that's the basic one. That's a basic right to vote. That's part of the election system that you've just snatched away and didn't ask anybody. That's wrong. There is no right way to do wrong. We need to fix this. I don't know if you fix it tonight. It needs to be fixed. Because a lot of folks that I spend a lot of time trying to get to vote and help, you just eliminated them from registration, from early voting. Put a label on it. Voter suppression. You want to do that? Discrimination against those that don't have transportation. What will you call it? Give that some thought when you get ready to vote. What will you call it? And are you now, as a group, going to do what's necessary to suppress voting? I'll know the answer to that when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. I do have a couple questions. Is a lease signed for this?
Yes, ma'am.
Then I guess my question is for the city attorney. If I feel like we don't have enough information on why this location was chosen, are we aware of the closest bus route to this location?
It's not in front of their facility, it's on Lynn Haven Parkway,
How approximate distance
Or London Bridge.
from?
or London Bridge. We'll have to realign.
At least half a mile.
Miss-
Okay,
Mr.
clerk, can you hold that,
Then my
please?
question is for the city attorney.
Please.
I understand inside that we have to make this decision within so many days. What are our issues? If we don't vote on this tonight, does the voting precinct remain where it's at?
If you don't move it, it remains where it is, yes.
Okay. I'm not comfortable voting on this tonight.
Is there any other
I'll leave it for
speakers?
discussion.
There are no other speakers, sir.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Rosemary.
Thank you.
would like to speak at the meeting.
Okay. Okay, good.
Oh, so if this is changed, does that mean all the early vote? I guess I need someone to answer my question.
Mr. Avalowitz is here. Okay. Is it appropriate, we'll call Mr. Avalowitz up?
Approaching the city clerk, requesting permission to speak.
You know, come on up, we're calling you. Welcome, sir, thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, city council members, the issue at hand here is changing the city ordinance to specify a new location for the central absentee precinct. The central absentee precinct is required to be at the location of the voter registrar. The intent is to move the voter registration function, consolidating 4 different functions as they presently exist into one location. And that location is 577 Central Drive. You have to have, we can have satellite voting at other locations, which we do, but you're required to have central absentee precinct at the location of the voter registrar.
Okay, Rosemary, and then Barbara, then.
So the early voters, will they still have the opportunity to come down here to the municipal center like they've done for years?
We will have 4 satellite locations for in-person absentee voting. One of the locations that we've used in the past is the fire station at the courthouse, next door to the building 14. And I think we're still in negotiation with the fire department about that.
I guess,
Now, I don't think building 14 is going to be available to us. I think maybe the city intends to use that building for other functions.
I'm just really surprised, and Al, you know, we've known each other for years, I totally respect you, that we really didn't have a briefing on this before now. This is all kind of a surprise when it came on our agenda, at least it was for me. And I am concerned that this is a pretty big change this close to an election. That a building was rented that we didn't know about. You know, and people going to register to vote and all the aspects of the whole process, that this just came on our agenda. This was not planned, so I really have a lot of concerns about it.
Okay, Ms. Henley, and then Louis.
I was going to ask the other
Yes.
early voting places. I believe you said there were 4.
The Great Neck Rec Center, Bayside Rec Center, the treasurer's office in the Kempsville area, and we are looking at the courthouse fire station. SeaTac Rec Center is the other one. We have a site at SeaTac. This is the first this year.
So they will all be at the same hours of early voting that you would have here at the center?
They should be the same hours at each location. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
Al,
Yes, sir.
you said it's required, does that mean it's required by state law?
By state law.
Okay, John, then Jess.
This is a question for the city manager. It might be, my memory's not always perfect, but I do recall when we had the comprehensive review of all the moves, and there were a lot of moves. It's like one of those old games you had with the light letters and moved around the open space to spell a word. I think that's how the kind of all the shifts were. But I do believe, you can correct me if my memory's wrong, while this might not have been a focused point move, I do think, talking about 14, I don't remember if they actually, I know it's a lease space, I can't refer if it referred to the place, but I do recall this was one of the moves that we did get informed on when we got that brief, and we made appropriations to that effect. But it probably just didn't catch people's attention because there were so many little moves. But I do remember the building number, not so much the function. But I do remember the building number was part of that larger brief that you gave us, and we did appropriate money to that effect. Is that correct?
Okay, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, sir, Mr. Moss. Council has appropriated for 2 budget cycles
funds to support the consolidation of the voter registrar, of the 4 functions that Mr. Alowitz has mentioned, and to locate a functioning site with 20,000 square feet.
20,000.
and a loading dock, and, we pursued the Sports Authority. I think that might ring a bell with some of you in the conversation, and due to the lease contract that is associated with the Lynn Haven Mall, they weren't allowed to open it to a public institution, agency. And so we've been at this process now for maybe 5 years, 4 years to make this all happen. I think Mr. Moss is correct. Compliance with the law to move the central absentee voting, but to reassure both Mr. Greenman and Andrew Jackson that I will assure that the fire station will be available for absentee voting, to maintain a location here so that those that were using this spot will still be able to have this spot.
Jessica?
Mark, so the ordinance says that we have 60 days. It looks like from Tuesday, September 3rd, we have 64 days. So theoretically, we could defer this to the September 3rd vote and still be in compliance, correct?
I have not done the math on that, but
I
60
quickly
days, 60 days is the requirement.
I have a lot of questions, and perhaps it was my mistake in not looking at this more thoroughly, but I think it would be incumbent upon us to defer to our next voting meeting, assuming that we can maybe figure out, as long as we're within that 60-day period. I think it would be good for us to make sure, especially considering we had a public hearing on this the same day as a vote, which I think we have agreed is against our loose policy.
All right.
I'll make a motion.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion?
The motion to defer to September 3.
That is correct. Okay. Okay, the vote is open.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you defer this item until September the 3rd.
Okay, thank you. And my apologies, I was remiss in making notation of our speaker policy. I want to remind everyone that the City Council speaker policy that allows certain representatives of groups to speak for 10 minutes applies only to planning items. As to all other items on the agenda, each speaker, whether speaking individually or on behalf of a group, will have 3 minutes to speak. Also, when speakers are called on each item, the clerk will call for those individuals who have signed up to speak. After those who have signed up to speak have spoken, the chair will ask are there any other persons who wish to speak on the item at hand. Those speakers will be allowed to speak and will be asked to give their name, address, telephone number to the clerk for the record. Thank you. All right, moving on to item J2, ordinance to add section 758-1, to the amend section 758.1 of the city code, limit operation of motorized scooters in certain areas and upon certain streets, requested by Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wood, and council members Jones and Wilson. Any speakers?
Yes, the first speaker is Demetria Marchione, and then the second speaker is Craig Henson.
Right. Welcome.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I have an old injury from Desert Storm. I was involved in that, and I wanted to say that the scooters have been a real blessing, and I can ride them to get around the beach. I live at the ocean front, and I was afraid they were going to take away the scooters, and I see a few young folks driving really fast on the Broadwalk, the cement part, and I just figured I'd put my input in today because they're so helpful for me because I can barely walk. So I thought I'd address y'all today and say they're an asset when I can't find a place to park, and I just leave my truck at home at the beach, and I can get to where I'm going 5 or 10 blocks. I don't ride them too much, but a little bit. So I just wanted to put my input in and say how they've been a real blessing to me to get to where I need to be. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for coming down, appreciate it.
The next speaker is Craig Henson. And after Mr. Henson will be Conrad Spencer.
Oh, there's somebody rolling on.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council.
Welcome.
I wish I wasn't here. I don't want to be here. This isn't my fight, but the city has put a burden on me, and as the Wounded Warriors told me, I have to stand up and fight. I'm a person with limited ability. I have a state-recognized and federal injury to my spine. I got hurt working on a cell phone tower 5 years ago. I wish I was still working. What leads me here is back in October of 2018, I went into the DMV Hilltop to renew my state-issued placard with proper credentials from my doctors and all medical professionals over the past 5 years. It shows that I am disabled, which allows me to get this state-recognized placard. At that moment, I was not aware I had federal rights. The Department of Motor Vehicles violated my federal rights, which I found out after the fact, which then allowed me to do research, look at federal law, state law, and city code. State code matched very similar to the federal ADA, and that made me happy. When I got to the city code, I noticed some different variances, which really weren't problems. They could have been overcome. And so I set out to try and do what the city required me to do, which was simply get a placard or a decal put onto my said mobility device. This is a Segway. It's protected under federal law, as well as I have multiple devices. So when I went to back to the DMV to get this decal, thinking that was the location to go, they informed me that the city treasurer's office or the revenue office was where I needed to go. So I called them on the phone, spoke with Lynn Gaskell, who informed me that the code that I was reading on vbgov.com, she had firsthand knowledge of, because at some point in her career in the city, she either implemented or helped design or create the 7-59.5 code that I was reading to her. And at that point, because of her familiarity with that code, she informed me that that code was no longer valid, that it had not been practiced by the city for several years, which was the decals. So I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Because the current code for Virginia Beach, an allowance of mobility devices, electric scooters, e-bikes, everything under that broad spectrum was stated as they're banned. So for me as being disabled, I had to find a way to be able to go down there and not be harassed by city officials or police or whatnot. So she realized that was a problem, directed me to city manager's office. At which point, this is in November of 2018 now. By January, I was finally able to get an accommodation from the city, which I got in the form of a letter. I'll just say this letter is I've already spoken to the Department of Justice. This letter is multiple federal violations. I've already been directed by the DOJ to file civil rights and ADA violations. I'm asking for the city, if you're going to vote on something with e-scooters and mobility devices, can we try to protect first our disabled community? I've already been assaulted by the Virginia Beach Police by being on my mobility device as they sit in court transcripts for what I was wearing. What I was wearing is currently what I have on now, including my helmet.
Okay, sir, with due respect, if we can look into this, and Mr. Manager, if we can, perhaps, we get with you, and by all means, feel free to call my office, make an appointment. I'll be glad to come out and meet you and talk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate that.
The next speaker is Conrad Spencer, and then after Mr. Spencer will be Virginia Wasserberg.
I'd like to give you guys in advance 11 grains of salt that you're supposed to take with what I'm about to say. Right now, I want to talk about the bizarre. I want to talk about the ironic. The city, in observance of nuisance behavior and local injury by e-scooter users, wants to heavily regulate e-scooter use and outright ban them in heavily demanded oceanfront areas. Why? Well, I'll quote them. The city desires to address activities that are hazardous to the health and well-being of citizens and visitors, hazardous to health and well-being of people. And council sat on its hands on a symbolic resolution to support modest firearm restrictions just this year. The reasoning behind that is multitudes more hazardous than e-scooters. Oh, by the way, I hope you guys enjoy Tackle High School football games this year. If one concussion happens, I'll look to you guys to ban football games in heavily trafficked middle and high school campuses. After all, you very much care for people doing hazardous activities and their well-being. Listen up, I'm not 100% sure why this collective punted on Councilwoman Wooten's resolution on firearms earlier this year, but if you're going to suddenly take swift action on protecting the public safety regarding devices that pose a threat, at least admit hypocrisy when it's present. Otherwise, vote this down and let e-scooter businesses use the most in-demand areas and make some money. Thank you.
Next speaker is Virginia Wasserberg. After Mrs. Wasserberg will be Barbara Massner.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm here to oppose this ordinance tonight. I'm in favor of e-scooters in our city. They're in my neighborhood of Rose Hall. And I know this Councilman Berlucci and I spoke on the phone today. This ordinance I know is about the Oceanfront District. It's not about Rose Hall. But I have been to the Oceanfront District this summer with friends of mine from Chicago, and they were very interested in the e-scooters there, and they were very interested in being safe. And I think that these scooters are of benefit to the tourists and not a hazard like this ordinance says. But I did want to address something in this ordinance. It says on line 45, lines 44 and 45, that it shall be unlawful for any person to operate a motorized scooter upon any street with a speed limit in excess of 25 miles per hour. You may not know it, but the General Assembly passed a law this session. It's 46.2-908.1, and it limits it to 20 miles an hour. So on a street, it limits scooters to 20 miles an hour. So that's really unneeded in this 25 miles an hour. I mean, state law has it at 20. So I think that maybe it's a good idea to really review this a little more carefully and really see, what does our state law say compared to what we have in here, and what are people doing? I mean, part of this, it says that the scooters are just being left in places, and that's getting on the nerves of businesses. Well, they're left in right in front of the walkway into my apartment. And it's very simple to just walk around it, and it's not left there all day. It's only left there for a few moments until whoever it was that was using it comes back and takes it to go where they need to go. So I think the thing that, I would just like to encourage you on is that sometimes things that are new seem scary. And this is new to Virginia Beach. It's only been around for a little while. And maybe it's a little bit scary. But it's doing well in a lot of other communities like ours around the nation, and I really think that we can work hard to make it do well here too, especially in the resort district. So please don't vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Barbara Massner. And after Ms. Massner is Andrew Jackson.
Good evening. It's been more than a little while. It's been over a year that they've been totally unregulated. They do not have to have a business location. People that have small businesses, they have to have a location, a facility. I've seen the truckloads, them using the empty Farm Fresh shopping center. These people have been operating for over a year, and at one of the meetings, I don't know if it's Sergeant Wichtendahl or Captain whatever, these people move up, she's been there a long time. She's concerned, they don't have enough police to regulate this. I've been down there seeing them speeding all over the place. I have pictures of children 8 and 10 years old riding double in the street. That's unsafe. And they leave them everywhere. Excuse me, but all you care about is revenue for the resort strip. And, you know, it's on the national news. There's major, major injuries, especially head injuries. There isn't even a requirement. They don't even supply helmets and require that these people wear helmets. And this, you know, Mayor Dyer, Jim Wood, Ms. Wilson, you're running for office. You know, where have y'all been for the last year? Where's your concern been? It's the end of the season. Your concern is at the end of the season. So, you know, and the fact that, you know, y'all don't read the agenda, even the agenda brief, everybody acts surprised on certain things. It's your duty to be informed on everything. Thank you.
Next speaker is Andrew Jackson, and after Mr. Jackson is Tim Worst.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm going to take a different position on this. I drive a lot, and so I compete with the scooters for the same highway. That's the problem. When they rent these scooters or how they do, there are regulations. There's things that they're supposed to do. They don't do it, but they're supposed to. I see those scooters as a good transportation method. They're also good for fun, and that's good. But I think they need to be regulated. I don't think you move away from them. But then we have to start regulating the rest of the stuff that happens at the ocean front. You don't require bicycles to wear helmets, but some of them need to have helmets. I don't know if you can regulate them and enforce it some sort of way where they stay within certain zones. For instance, the bus path, the bus channel. But the way they are now, they're unsafe not only for the persons riding the scooter, but the people driving cars, the people walking on the street. They're everywhere. And I don't think that it's a bad mode of transportation. It's up and coming if it's not already here, because they're everywhere in the city. But I think they need to be regulated where there's a safety factor. You can't require them to get a driver's license, I guess, but maybe you could, but you don't do that for bicycles either. So I think where we are at this point is that's one of those things you need to leave in the package, go back, think about it for a while, and figure out how you're going to regulate them, because they're not going away. Either that or you're going to have to tell the companies that bring them here they're only allotted so many. I don't think that's going to happen either. So maybe we need to rethink this issue, both for the safety side and the transportation side. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tim Worst. After Mr. Worst is Reed Greenman.
Welcome.
Good evening. I wanted to speak on the scooters a little bit, and I don't think we need to heavily regulate them, but I do think we need to reel them in a bit. I think we just need to treat them like any other business. They look like a blast. My brother and some family members had a blast on them a couple weekends ago. I'm glad there's no video of me on one down in Key West on spring break. But a coworker just got 10 stitches on her ride in the last 10 days or so. Kids are riding these things all over the place. Little kids, not 16, 17-year-olds, but little kids. On the business side, who else can put their product anywhere they want to in the city? Rosemary's not allowed to sell a house anywhere you want to on Atlantic Avenue. Jessica can't go in front of Kempsville High School and sell insurance. You have a business, you have a location. I think the same thing could happen with the scooters. Give them a main location, let them have a business place, and they can rent the scooters from there, and the people can get their scooter at their house, wherever they want to. They can deliver those. lawsuits. And I believe it's San Diego, but San Diego's facing a lawsuit now over scooters. We just need to reel them in, make sure that they pay the taxes they're supposed to pay, give them a storefront, and they can rent these things all they want to. I don't want to create more headaches for folks like the gentleman who spoke first. It's a great thing for him to have that scooter. I don't want him to miss out on that. I don't want folks to miss out on how much fun they are. I do think we're creating a little bit of headaches for our Virginia Beach Police Department, who is going to have to go out there and take records and give tickets, et cetera, on these things and work accidents, as well as our EMS folks. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I had not planned to speak on this item, but I was listening, so I thought I would just share 2 things. First of all, Saturday I was down at the ocean front, and there is a problem. I mean, people were all weaving in and out of the traffic at the ocean front. It was dangerous. As others have told you, there are little kids riding these things everywhere. It's pretty much out of control, and they shouldn't be in the street. As Mr. Worst just was pointing out, it ought to be a business. Well, my concern, a little interesting on this, is law enforcement. We're short on officers. We have shortage of needs of our law enforcement. We're going to put an unnecessary burden on our courts and our law enforcement, writing tickets, or possibly arresting these kids, all of them, the juveniles. It's going to be a nightmare. So just as Mr. Worth mentioned, it's a business. So maybe we could amend this later, if you're going to vote on it tonight, to do what you're going to do, and think about this. Why not pass an ordinance that passes the burden of the cost of policing and reinforcing compliance with the rules on the business instead of we, the taxpayers? I work with the Virginia Beach Tea Party. If we're going to start writing tickets, adding additional officers, doing the overhead, flooding the courts, which are full as they are, there's a cost associated with that. And that cost ought to be paid by the business trying to make a profit off of this instead of me and the rest of the people in this room. Our police have better things to do than to chase kids out of the street down on Atlantic Avenue. I love them. They are fun. But as it was mentioned, they're not following the rules, and your only option is to enforce them through law enforcement, and that has a cost. Put that cost on the business, support the free market, and make them pay for the burden instead of us. Thank you.
That's all the speakers said.
Okay, Mr. Wood?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to address just the comments that the 3 of the speakers made. Mr. Jackson, you indicated allocate so many and regulate it. Mr. Greenham, you talked about regulating the businesses. Mr. Worst, you talked about lawsuits and regulating the business, that sort of thing. That is all part of what we have to do by December 31st if we want to do any regulations. It's a franchise agreement similar to what the city of Norfolk has enacted right now. Mr. Jackson, to your point, the city of Norfolk has limited the number of scooters permitted in their city. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this, and I appreciate everybody coming out to talk about it. My apologies to my council members for handing this out at the dais. However, I just got most of this information delivered to me today. In this package, you're going to see EMS just put together their list. I thought he might have it on his PowerPoint, but he didn't when he did his presentation today. We often say our first responsibility is public safety, and this is a major public safety issue. You've got this VB-EMS documentation. Since the implementation or introduction of these scooters, there have been 65 individuals who have been injured and been taken by or treated by EMS. That does not count the people who've gone to the hospital on their own. So, for example, that didn't count probably the person who got their 10 stitches. It didn't count my painter whose kid fell off and got 4 stitches on his face. So because they self-transported. So VB-EMS has done a pretty extensive survey of this, indicating 58 single rider accidents, 2 scooter versus scooter, 2 scooter versus pedestrian, 1 scooter versus bicyclist. They've gone through times and days of the week. Injury location, interesting, 28% are head injuries, which is significant. Beyond that, the Journal of the American Medical Association did a report in January and documentation. Their conclusions are injuries associated with standing electric scooter use are a new phenomenon in variant severity and study. helmet use is low, and significant subset of injuries occurred in patients younger than 18 years. Texas Department of Public Health, the City of Austin Public Health, in conjunction with the CDC, did their own survey and conducted quite a bit of information. Last week, 3 city contractors were hit by scooters working on the, and that email is in here too, tucked in there, working on the American U.S. Life Saving Association thing. They were unloading trucks and they got hit by scooters on the boardwalk. Now, scooters aren't allowed on the boardwalk, but they got hit by scooters on the boardwalk. And, so the response is, well, they're gonna have to have them wear reflective vests on the boardwalk. People doing city stuff, walking on the boardwalk, are supposed to have reflective vests. The injuries are caused, now there's a great deal of information. Injuries are caused by the geofencing itself. There's a GPS drift, when you operate, you're looking at your map in your car, your GPS, and it says you gotta turn in 350 feet, but it's right in front of you. Well, that's the kind of thing. So if you've got this GPS drift, all of a sudden your scooter could come to a halt, people fall. Throttles stick, brakes fail. The scooters have a lifespan of about 6 months, according to the scooter industry people. Handlebars come off. Going up onto a driveway, a little half-inch curb, the doctors have actually created a meme that I put in here called the tib fib special, and this was done in California. And that's the reference of a specific kind of injury one gets when they step down off of the scooter to stop it. When one of these other things happen, they break their tibula and fibula and have to have plates and screws and that sort of thing. And they've actually got a name for it in California. If we talk about lawsuits, there are hundreds of lawsuits underway. The one in San Diego is an ADA lawsuit, which goes to what the other gentleman was talking about. Insurance right now, there is, my homeowner's insurance doesn't cover it according to USAA. My commercial insurance guy says that if I'm operating a scooter, he does not have a policy he can write for it. However, there is an Israeli company that on their website that says they're getting ready to release this, but it's still listed as coming soon. So based on that, I spoke with a personal injury attorney in California who is the scooter injury guru. She called me out of the blue yesterday when I was driving back from a flooding meeting in Richmond, and I was stuck in traffic, and I spent an hour and a half calling her. Fortunately, she didn't bill me because I think the LA rates are probably significantly higher, but she went through a lot of this detail, and basically she won't take a case on a lot of these because if people don't have insurance. She's had a couple of instances where in some states automobile insurance covers it, but here they're not considered that. You talk about the responsibility. Scooter companies hide behind the end user agreement. The Lime user agreement is 261 cell phone pages long. 261 cell phone pages long. This same attorney has a video on it on her website of her going through it. It took her 1 hour and 23 minutes to read the Lime end user agreement. So what's in that end user agreement? The user assumes all responsibilities and liability, including determining weather conditions. And that's repeated throughout. There's multiple indemnifications against that. The user is responsible for knowing all laws and for paying all fines. The user is also supposed to know that it's 18 is the age, which clearly, as many people have seen, doesn't hit that. Now, this is interesting. You're not allowed to use your cell phone while you're riding the scooter. However, when you ease out of the geofence area, you get a text message telling you get out of the geofence area. So if the tech phone is in your pocket, it's vibrating. It could be your mom texting you. It could be the scooter company telling you that. You're only supposed to have one person on it. That's in there. There are weight limits. And if you go to court against Lime, the venue is San Mateo, California. So the oceanfront rules aren't working. They just aren't. Mr. Berlucci spoke earlier about the EMS graduation. I went there. I showed up about 40 minutes early because I got my time messed up on going to Toledo. So I drove down to the oceanfront, just drove around and saw a significant number of scooters disobeying the rules. Then a citizen sent me a bunch of photos. Mr. Bartholomew sent me a bunch of photos, who lives down there. The interesting thing is the geofencing clearly is not working because he sent me a number of photos of people on the boardwalk, on the bike path, riding these things. So it's still working down there. San Diego is as of today, is in the process of banning Lime scooters because of issues that they've had. That's a news update I saw today. Our competitors, Ocean City has banned them, Myrtle Beach is banned because they're home rule and they can do that, we cannot. There's a class action lawsuit now, an ADA lawsuit that we talked about Montoya versus the city of San Diego, talking about these things blocking sidewalks, blocking ADA accessibility and that sort of thing. You know, having said all that, we can coexist, and I think there is, Ms. Wasserberg talked about them in the neighborhoods and things like that. I think we can coexist, but I think the important thing here is that we have to have a franchise agreement, and we have to take immediate action to protect public safety, certainly at the ocean front and in other areas. I cannot tell you, without exaggeration, I get 2 or 3 complaints a day. So some of these photos were sent to me this morning by a gentleman on Shore Drive. He dragged a bird scooter out of the water, and you see that one sitting on the beach. Now, why is it on the beach? That doesn't make sense. However, that's the way it is. So, Mr. Mayor, having said all that, I move that we approve this.
Okay, do we have a second? I have it. Okay, Aaron?
Sir, first I want to say thank you for your service and commitment to our country. I really do. Thank you for that. Secondly, the words that comes to mind for me when you talked about innovative transportation to our city, e-scooters, yes, it's something new, completely new to our city. It was dropped on us. I think right now our first step was we do have a pilot program, and we agreed and voted on. We let the pilot program go through, then come back and see how we would regulate that going forward. Also, I think it's becoming upon us to remember there's a transitional period. Anytime there's something new, you're always going to start off, bumps and bruises going forward as well. But I think there's a transitional period that we are still in, and fresh in. Another important factor I'd like to mention is we were in the height of our tour season. There's 2 weeks left in our tour season. And particularly the ocean front, there's hardly anyone around the ocean, not to the tourist season as well. So I'm really interested to see how those numbers of incidents and safety issues go down. But if we didn't have a pilot program in place already, I would be inclined to support this. As of now, I am not. I'd like to see us utilize our pilot program going forward. Obviously, public safety is a huge issue for us, and making sure our public is safe. But I also like to remind the public too, there's inherent risk when riding any vehicle or scooter going fast. There's inherent risk in riding a bicycle, inherent risk of riding a skateboard as well. I mean, so while it's upon us the city to do our job, make sure we regulate it, I just want to make sure we aren't just banning new and innovative technology and modes of transportation because we're off to a rough start. Once we get through our transitional periods, we can always go back and look at it again. But as of now, I'm inclined not to support this.
Okay, Rosemary, Michael, and then Jess.
First of all, I live right on Atlantic Avenue. I live on the boardwalk. I see this every day of my life. And I supported the pilot program. And unfortunately, and I, extended it, I was supposed to, say, let's extend it to make sure it works. But the problem is, it's not working. It's not working, just like the pictures that Jim has shown. They're on the boardwalk, they're on the bike path, they are on the sidewalks, they're zipping in traffic, little children are riding them, and I personally had, I almost had an accident with one. I had to slam on my brakes because they were going the wrong way down the trolley lane. And it really scared me. I mean, it should have scared them. They just kept on going very, very fast. And there's no way to identify who they are. They're not marked. So if you see someone doing the wrong thing, you can't report it because they all look the same. So it's a real issue, and I really want our folks, our people come to our city to have time. That's the idea of a vacation. And this is meant to be temporary. This is a temporary ban until we can get some of the regulations in place. We can, work with the companies, the number of people that they are, have a way of identifying who they are, have a means of reporting them. And it's a huge drain on our police resources. Our police, I don't think the best use of them is to be the scooter patrol. Right now they've become the scooter patrol rather than patrolling the things that are really dangerous to the road. So I support this. Again, it's a temporary thing until we can work out a franchise agreement, and that should be December, I believe. Has to be by December. But I think if we don't support this and something really catastrophic happens, we're going to feel really terrible about it.
Okay, Michael?
Well, I would like to recognize the efforts of the sponsors of this ordinance to promote safety in our community. I share their concerns about the need for safety, but I also have a slightly different perspective on this discussion. Because while I acknowledge the public safety component, I agree with Councilman Rouse when he says there is inherent risk to the transportation options that we choose. And the EMS reports that are presented are, they are a little scary, and they do reflect real and in some cases horrifying injuries that occur. I would just point out that similar injuries or a variety of horrifying injuries would be shown if we asked for reports about bicycle accidents, skateboards, rollerblades. People injure themselves on curbs often and in their own homes. And so I don't know that we have a meaningful analysis of injuries that would justify this limitation. And having acknowledged the public safety component, I also want to acknowledge that I recognize the opportunity this technology presents in the areas of transportation, sustainable transportation options, opportunity for more people, as well as economic development and quality of life. I think it's important that we consider that communities around the world and around the country have found ways to live with the technology in ways that don't restrict and limit them. And I believe we can do that here. I know that we can do that here. And I believe we can make it work, where we can enjoy scooters and we can do it safely in our community without this specific limitation.
Okay, Jess?
Thank you. I think it will come as no surprise that I echo the sentiments of Councilman Rouse and Councilman Berlucci. I'd also like to address the comment made, and Tim, you and I don't mean to pick on you, but there are lots of businesses that operate along the city without a physical presence. Probably the most popular would be a taxi, Uber, Lyft, peddlers, maybe not in our city, but in many other cities, hopefully one day food trucks. There are plenty of businesses that are found in unconventional ways and provide great opportunities and great enrichment to our community. And I think that we have to be cautious in seeing data, especially data that reflects a short period of time, and using that as our ammunition to say, okay, we can't have this or we can't allow it. I understand the shortness of time, and that's not a criticism to my colleague, but a lot of these are self-inflicted. You've got people who fell off a scooter or hit a curb or hit an uneven pavement, and I can tell you, when I was on my honeymoon in Rome, I was renting a motor scooter that went 50 miles an hour, and I came up over a curb and rear-ended somebody, and I was in an unfamiliar place doing an unfamiliar action, and it was scary. However, the person I bumped looked back at me and kept going, so it wasn't a big deal. But I say that not as to speak to what could happen, but we have limitations as people whenever we operate any type of vehicle. And an accident can happen whether you're walking, you're bicycling, you're riding a motor scooter, you're driving a car. We have a significant amount of car accidents in our city. And Virginia Beach is the 101 worst city to drive in according to the IIHS safety rating. So there are risks and there are dangers that we have. I would agree with another comment that was made. I think we should be passing the cost to of the compliance to the business. I've spoken with the Bird representative and made that exact mention that if people cannot stay where they're supposed to stay, they should be incurring fines that the scooter companies can regulate. And that, I think that truly, if we have an issue with compliance, I think people are most apt to act when it impacts their wallet. The only other thing I would say, and it's more anecdotal, this past weekend, my husband and I went to Boston. Boston is, of course, a very dense area. However, everywhere I went, we either walked or biked on the bike rentals that they had, and it's a similar structure. You get your app out, you take your bike, and then you drop it where you want to drop it, and then come back and get it if you want to get it. And they had us on all the roads that were 45 miles an hour, roads that were 30 miles an hour, roads that were 20 miles an hour. They did not permit you on the sidewalk, and you had to either get with traffic or get off. And I think that the one distinction that I hope we take away from and what we implement in our city is there was very clear signage. You understood that you needed to be on the road. You understood that you needed to be in the bike path. And if people were not in compliance, they were actively making that decision for themselves and putting themselves at risk. And I think we need to get back to accepting and acknowledging that we as individuals have some sovereignty over our decisions. So I'm not going to support this evening. I appreciate this issue, and I completely agree that there are concerns, but I think we have time to make that decision in December.
Okay, Mr. Moss?
I do concur with the thought process of the three council member peers that just spoke. I do appreciate the issue that was raised and the public safety concerns, but if the public safety concerns are that large at the oceanfront, they're that large across the whole city. You should be just as safe. This represents, with the lack of regulation, we shouldn't be saying you're safer in one part of the city than another part of the city. I think equal protection of the law, we're basically saying we have a city emergency with regards to safety. That would be the test. And then we would be saying until we get to December 31st, we'd have no scooters anyway. But this legislation suggests that it's okay if by chance you get hit by a bus or a truck in your 25-mile-an-hour neighborhood, that we're willing to accept that and accept the responsibility that happened and not feel bad. But if it happens in front of a trolley, we're supposed to feel terrible because of some individual's judgment. I fail to see the consistency of the logic there. We shouldn't be differentiating across the city where it's safe and where it's not. It's either unsafe everywhere or it's an acceptable risk everywhere. That's kind of my view. When this issue has come up, and many of you have heard me talk about it, I think the thing that's missing is, and this may be state law or local, is that the provider of the service is allowed to make themselves immune from liability for their product. America's famous, when your money's on the table, you act differently because of your behavior. We make people purchase insurance for a car, then part of that little agreement, when you get that thing, you gotta pay for insurance. So the event that someone is hurt, and this is a society where people jump out of airplanes to go ski on mountains, so that's a lot of risk. But anyway, my point is, I think we are people who like risk. No one wants to live in risk-free societies because that's what liberty is all about, choice. But you have to be responsible and accountable for your choice. And the current laws, which I hope the franchise would agree, is that people can't escape the financial responsibility for their things, and therefore they should have to purchase insurance when they buy it. We should make sure, like in California, they can't waive their liability. But if this is unsafe, if that was an amendment, then it's unsafe across the whole city. It's not just unsafe at the ocean front. So if that's not the motion before us, I'm going to stand with the judgment of Mr. Belushi, Mr. Rouse, and Councilwoman Abbott. Thank you very much.
All right, anybody else at this point? Guy?
I'll try to be brief. I'm going to adopt the same arguments that have just been preceded me. I'm not going to repeat them. But I would say the main reason that I want to stick to where we are is I think this pilot program was well thought out. I think we knew the risk at the time, and I think that it's premature to take steps. There's no difference now, really, than I don't think, and what we knew then and what we know now. It's a messy, complicated, complex situation. We have a very good person in Brian Solis running this investigation to make a recommendation to council to what to do, and I think we should let that play out, take advantage. I remain a skeptic. I very well could end up voting again to ban them entirely. I'm really want to hear from the public. I want the survey to be completed. I'll give a plug. I'm having town hall on September 19th, and I hope people will come, and if you want to talk about how you feel about these scooters, we'll be there listening. But I am not going to vote for this motion for the reasons that have already been stated. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, if I could just say briefly, this is a tough one, but I truly appreciate the tenor of all the discussion we've had. But once again, this is a very tough, complicated situation. And, these things are good for us physical therapists, let's put it that way. But once again, just going forward in terms of erring on the side of caution, I out there and I'm seeing too many young people on these things. I am seeing too many people riding double and things of that nature, zigzagging in and out and everything. It does present a little bit of a unique challenge as compared to some of the more traditional. And yes, this is, I guess, what they call disruptive technology for now, and I guess things got to get worked out over time, and hopefully at least that once we get to the franchise agreement stage and lessons learned about what we're doing, but I think at least for now, this sets the stage, and it's incumbent on us. Public safety is one of our highest priorities on this dais right here. And so at least for now, but once again, the discussions will go forward, as we discuss things. But protecting now, if we can save one major injury, and from what I understand, there's some fatalities out there these days on record. So I think, yeah. So, once again, I will be, supporting this. But are we ready for the vote?
We did that second. 5 votes, 6 to 5, you approve the ordinance regarding the scooters.
Okay, thank you all for your conversation. Okay, moving on to the next one, resolutions to support the city's applications for funding for the Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT, for fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 21-22. A, transportation alternative set-aside programs, rate pedestrian and bicycle path enhancements, and B, revenue share programs, rate 3, roadways capital improvement program projects. Do we have any speakers?
So are we going to have two separate votes or two separate?
Do we split them out?
Well, they're two separate resolutions,
Okay.
How many speakers are there?
just one on each item.
So just can we call the speaker up?
Yeah.
So you just want to do?
Yeah, well, one speaker on both items, if
Okay,
that would be
thank you.
okay.
Uh-huh. Barbara Messner?
Good evening. This all pertains to public safety. Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program reference pedestrian and bicycle path enhancement. How can you enhance something you don't even have? I mean, you have these narrow little things next to the road that are called bike paths. And Brian Solis, who's now part of special events, he was in Parks and Rec in the 90s. And Parks and Rec was told we didn't have real bike paths. The bike path on the boardwalk was used, we had trolleys on the bike path. And this, we have a budget. This is applying for money from VDOT, not just through 2019, 2020, but 21 and 22. So you're spending this money way ahead, Mr. Hanson, just like purchasing that property without
Ms. Messner,
due
will you
process.
please state?
I am talking about due process and funding and budgets and how you spend your money.
The top.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not finished. Everything's geared towards tourism. I appreciate Mr. Moss's comments. These scooters are everywhere. And, set-aside programs, alternatives, we can't take care of what we have. So, like I said, VDOT and Hampton Roads Transit, they have major problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the speakers, sir?
All right.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
This
Vote
is
is
both
vote.
items A and B?
Item A and B.
Thank you. Mr. Rouse, may I have your vote, please? Thank you. By a vote of 11 to 0, you approve resolutions number 3A and B.
Okay. Item J4, resolution to authorize contract between the Virginia Beach Community Services Board and the Commonwealth of Virginia for a mental health, developmental, and substance use disorder services.
We have one speaker, Conrad Stinter.
Now, this item is the second item today that is a hallmark of federalism. And while we all agree mental health services are a needed public commodity, 3 different sectors take part in this $62.5 million contract: the City of Virginia Beach, the State of Virginia, and the United States. Underscoring modern monetary theory again, I'd point out $2 million comes from DC and $12 million from Richmond. In a world I'd lobby for, DC would shoulder most of that funding through discretionary deficit spending, and VB and Virginia less. Otherwise, this is a gift horse, and let's support it. Thank you.
That's all the speakers.
Okay, do we have a motion on that?
moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
By a vote of 10 to 0, Mr. Wood, having stepped out, you've approved the resolution.
Okay, the next one is ordinances rate compensation to city council appointees effective July 1st.
The first speaker is Michelle I'm sorry. Are we you
Okay,
separating
go for, yes, we're ready.
for A?
Okay, we're gonna go from item A first.
Okay, Michelle Riley is the first speaker, and Rhoda Marsh is the second.
Welcome.
Thank you. Well, when I was getting my remarks ready this afternoon, my teenagers reminded me that I should start out with something positive, which I thought was nice that they reminded me of that. So my positive thought here is, it is amazing how much money we pay our employees in Virginia Beach. I did a little bit of homework today, and looks like the national average for a city manager is $90,000 for a national average. Now, for cities that are twice our size, the average is $220,000 per year. Our city manager already makes $288,000 plus with all of the benefits. That seems like that's probably already enough money, and maybe we should save a 3% raise. It's just interesting to me that we never ever have conversations about how to save money. It seems like every single conversation we have in this room is about how we're gonna spend more money. And just doing the math, looking at the existing salaries of the 5 people that are coming up for this raise, if we did not do that, we would save about $650,000 per year if we did not do the raise. So I just would like to ask y'all to please consider not giving this 3% raise right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Marsh, and after Mrs. Marsh is Mr. Evans.
Good evening, Mayor Dyer and council members. It's good to be here tonight. I'm going to talk about maintenance, all right? Maintenance is something I emailed you on, and we have a policy that was put out and adopted in 1999, September 7th of 1999, that maintenance and repair of aging city infrastructure is very important. And it says in that policy, which I emailed you just a bit ago, the city manager shall be responsible for submitting a budget that adequately funds maintenance and repair of city infrastructure. You also got a presentation by Parks and Rec, and this was back on June 7th, 2019. And Parks and Rec currently has a $34.75 million backlog on deferred maintenance of existing Parks and Rec. And they also have a $5.2 million deferred maintenance on the Sportsplex, not the Sports Center, the Sportsplex out in Princess Anne. So that's about $40 million. when you look at that combined with our deferred maintenance on stormwater, nobody is watching the maintenance. I doubt that any of you drive a car and you fail to take it in for maintenance. You probably all go in for your checkups when you need your 3,000 or 6,000 mile, but who is watching the maintenance? And if it's supposed to be our city manager, because that's what was adopted, you're not watching him. So I'm looking at all of you not watching him, and he's not watching it, and we have a maintenance problem. So I am opposed to increasing anybody's salary while we have this maintenance backlog, and there needs to probably be a separate maintenance schedule that looks at all the maintenance that's been deferred. And I bring this all to the attention because we say throughout our budget that city services are supposed to be delivered in a most cost-effective manner for residents. And you've seen this before. We have a lot of people who are living in poverty, 46,000 people in Virginia Beach. I brought this up when you were talking about the budget last year. So it seems fairly unusual that we have this many people who are living in poverty in our city. And we have something like a large amount of money that we want to increase our salary for our city manager, who is already probably one of the best paid. I've heard he makes more than this governor of the state of Virginia. So I'm asking you not to increase his salary, and I'm asking somebody to figure out why the maintenance is so backlogged and nobody's looking at it. With how many thousands of employees, nobody's looking at our maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's Raymond. Reed Greenman, and then the next speaker is Joe Bellick.
Good evening, Mayor Dyer, the rest of you. I'm sorry I'm up here so much, but I didn't write the agenda, you did. I'm vehemently opposed to this raise on so many reasons, and they are long. In my line of work and my job, if I had done the things that Mr. Hansen had done, I would be terminated. Yet you don't terminate Mr. Hansen. I'm wearing a button here that asks you to do that. We need a better city manager. There are so many reasons, and people will talk about them, but I'm going to focus on one. I'm going to focus on, and I'm very uncomfortable that you're sitting here, but you're responsible for your own words. When he wrote to a deputy city manager about threatening to punch the Secretary of Transportation in the face because light rail referendum had failed, and the Secretary of Transportation, Aubrey Lane, had taken the money back and also wouldn't approve $2 million for Bruce Thompson's Cavalier hotel adjustments. And our city manager was upset about that. And in the quote in the paper, and in this quote, refer to Will Sessoms at the time, he says on 3/10/17, explain to Will how pissed off I am. Aubrey's just fanning the flames of sentiment that exists in Richmond. He makes it more difficult for us to repay that $20 million. It makes it look like we're just doing away with another TPOF grant for Atlantic Avenue, not doing me any favors. Told Will Sessoms, I don't want to meet with Aubrey because he's going to have to put a cotton ball in his nose after I punch him. I would lose my job if I did that at work. What do you have to do to lose your job as a city manager? Not just deferred maintenance, but 12 years to take care of flooding, all the things that it is that are the priorities that you set at your council retreat. It's not getting done. I'm not only not in favor of giving Mr. Hansen a raise, your employee, I would ask you to consider getting a better city manager. And as Michelle pointed out, put it out for a competitive bid and get somebody at a more reasonable cost. That's what I do in my business. This article alone is a reason to terminate Mr. Hansen, but Barbara's quoted in here saying, well, he apologized, we'll give him another chance. After this, faux pas after faux pas after faux pas, and you do nothing. It's time to get a new city manager. Thank you.
Joe Bellick. And then the next speaker is Marcus Loring.
Hey, welcome, Jeff.
Once again, I have to follow Reed, you know. Good evening. I would just like to say that I don't think tonight is all about shortcomings, accomplishments, or whatever with the city manager. What I do think, though, is that this item should be deferred until you decide if you are going to renew his contract next month. Next month is I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the month where you can either go ahead or it automatically will renew when it comes due in January. I do believe is that not the case, Mr. Wood? That is not the case. I thought there was a certain number of days before his contract goes into effect. No? Okay, then I will change my wording. Then, no. This is not about anything to do with the man. I'm not going to be a character assassin here. This has to do with the fact that his contract is going to be up soon, and then you should defer this until you decide if you are going to renew his contract. This has nothing to do with anything but that tonight. We can have the discussion on another day about whether we should keep Mr. Hanson or not. He's in the position right now, he's got a contract. You can terminate the contract anytime you want. That's not for me to say, that's for all of you to say. That's for all of you to take with you as you go home. But I do say that we need not give him a 3% raise at this point until we decide if we're going to keep him as the city manager when his contract does become due, I believe in January, is that correct? That part is correct, okay. Okay, that's really all I needed to say tonight was defer it. You don't need to give it to him. I don't think he's gonna be living in poverty if he doesn't get that 3% raise right now. Some of us would be, but not him. Thank you.
Marcus Goring. And after Mr. Goring is Conrad Shisventure.
Welcome.
Good evening, all. I'm opposed to give any of those 5 persons a raise because I think raises should be given after they have a book of accomplishments taken together. And I don't see any accomplishments, especially after the last tax raise, that I'm looking at closer every day, and I'm finding more and more things that I'm more opposed to. So I'm against it.
Thank you.
Conrad Shisventure, and then the next speaker will be Barbara Messner.
One of the great ironies this week for me is getting an email from Virginia Beach City Public Schools saying my employment application will expire soon. The irony is I've had to renew this off and on since 2012, that I've applied for innumerable positions there and on Virginia Beach City's public schools websites and the city's too. And the only time the city gives me the time of day is on thank you, try again emails and hey, you're about to expire emails. And now is my chance to suggest to the city that some of their superfluously compensated employees not get a raise of many thousands of dollars. Maybe I feel personally slighted by the city and it manifests in hoping these individuals not get raises, but if I could be cool, calm, and collected for a minute, I'll ultimately just suggest this. Dissolve the city manager council form of government and replace it with a system much more representative of the people and similar to a strong mayor council system. Thank you.
Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner will be Tim Worsh.
Good evening. Mr. Hanson, how are you doing? I just want to remind everyone that you worked for 10 years under SPOR, and the city hired you because they want you and you do exactly what they want. And if you leave or retire for whatever reason, they'll find somebody else that you've put in because you get to, you know, we have Chandler, we have Ron Williams, we had Doug Smith, I mean, on and on. There'll be somebody else to do what you do. The liability and the problem is with everyone on council who looks the other way and lets you do what you do and doesn't give a flying you know what. Anyway, sorry. But people don't want to recall the council members who hire you and who pay you these salaries and who pay Spore, who's retired. You are in charge of public safety, and I think after, all these years that we can't retain police officers, and, like I said, 3 firemen quit recently, policemen moved to North Carolina. I mean, the situation with the city and city employees, it wasn't an accident. What happened, why was Craddock not fired
Ms.
before?
Messner, I
Okay,
think
I'm
appropriate.
talking about Mr. Hanson, and you interrupt me, you don't interrupt everyone else.
Yeah, but-
I'm talking about public safety and whether or not he deserves a raise and who's liable, and you are one of the people most liable, Mr. Dyer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Worst, and after Mr. Worst is Diana Howard.
Good evening again. My vote is no pay raise for Mr. Hanson. I hear from a couple of good friends of mine that you are a very nice gentleman around your neighborhood, and I don't doubt that at all. But I'm talking about business, and I'm talking about the city of Virginia Beach. Like Reed, I would have been fired many times ago had I done the things that Mr. Hanson has done. There are too many mistakes made, mistakes that are embarrassing. They get newspapers, TV, and social media coverage about Virginia Beach. You were told months ago, maybe a year ago, from council that things have to improve. As Reed said, you threatened to punch a state official in the face. You emailed developer Bruce Thompson city info, an email about a project that no other developer received. When known pollution was going on near a Virginia Wesleyan project, you told them to continue. You embarrassed, this is my least favorite, you embarrassed and belittled a police officer who was working traffic. You said, "Do you know who I am?" Apparently the traffic wasn't going fast enough for you. The officer kept his cool, you did not. About first responders, you gave half-ass attempts to fix pay compression for too many years. Recently, you made a remark at an Ocean Park Civic League that folks who don't want to get in trouble at Flotopia should paint their faces. The next day was our May 31st tragedy, where you quickly said that the shooter, had a good disciplinary record, didn't have any disciplinary issues. We now know that's not true. Last week or week before, I was at the listening session at the Sandler Center. The number one word used there, and there are several folks in this audience who were there, the number one word used there at the meeting was toxic. That word was used over and over. This is the city manager's leadership team, his workforce, his managers, his deputies, his supervisors. This is the toxic work environment that he's created and that you guys are allowing. There are more than 500 likes from residents on my page about removing Dave Hanson. This opinion that I'm expressing tonight is not just mine. This is people all over the city of Virginia Beach. We deserve better. As a lifelong resident, we deserve better, especially our employees that are working for the city of Virginia Beach right now. Thank you very much.
How you doing back there?
I'm good. How are you all doing? And I too feel sorry for you, Mr. Hanson, having to stand here and listen to all this. Our main objection is the budget every year and your failure to be able to do it without raising taxes and fees. And as a citizen of Virginia Beach, having to come here year after year and ask you not to raise our taxes and fees is just humiliating. You know, we shouldn't have to ask you to do that. You should have to ask us if we want our taxes raised for whatever it is that you need to do. And what I shouldn't be blaming you for this, because it's all of your fault, because you didn't give him the direction that he needed in creating a budget without taxes and fees. So he did what you all wanted him to do, as long as you still want him to do private-public partnerships, to spend all our tax dollars on putting up parking garages for SGAs, for doing the sports center, for doing, let's do the pier, let's do the convention center hotel, let's do Rudy Inlet, let's do the dome site, but we'll raise your taxes for necessary things like stormwater. So, the buck stops here.
That is all the speakers for this.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I think it's important to note that we haven't vetted this issue. Salary.
Speak up, please.
I think it's important to note that we haven't vetted this issue sufficiently as a council on the salaries that we have here. The only discussion we've had is the city manager's salary. And it just seems to me like it's premature for us to act on this particular item 5 tonight. And having said that, I'd like to defer it to the next formal meeting. So I'll move to do that.
Do we have a second? Okay, discussion. Okay, vote's open.
Can I just get some clarity? Is that just for 5A?
No, it's all
All
of
of them.
We have speakers
No,
on
we have
other
speakers.
items, on DC.
Each one separate.
Okay, we'll do separate. Motion of deferral on 5A only right now?
That's fine.
Okay.
By a vote of 8-3, you've approved this, you have approved the deferral to September 3rd.
Okay. Next, we will have open discussion on the city attorney.
The first speaker is Reed Greenman, and then the next speaker is Barbara Messner.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Mr. City Attorney. When I called to sign up to speak, I found it very interesting because I didn't want to waste y'all's time and drag this out. So I wanted to come up and make my 3 minutes on all 5 people. It's kind of what Lewis was talking about. But I was told that wasn't an option because you decided that we had to come up and sign up on each individual person. I said, well, all right, if you're going to make me do that, then fine, I'll go up and do each person one at a time rather than condense all my remarks together and get it over with in 3 minutes. Don't know why you are forcing me to do that. As others have stated, I think we really need to take a look at these salaries. We need to think about what it's cost. You need to think about the optics, about the people in this room and live in our city when you're paying this. One of the things I find onerous is a $10,000 car allowance for somebody making close to $300,000 with benefits. If you can't pay for your own damn car on that kind of salary, then you can't manage money. If you can't manage your own money, you shouldn't be managing mine. Why you give that out, I don't know, but my theory is you just don't want to have that person put in the receipts for reimbursement so that we could FOIA that information and find out where he's going and who he's meeting with. The car allowance is ridiculous. You make that kind of money, buy your own car. Just saying. But you guys dole it out like it doesn't matter, like it's Play-Doh or play money. As far as the city attorney goes, I sat in that retreat where you were talking about the issues, and I listened to the city attorney tell you, hey, you know, I don't like it when an individual city council member comes to me and wants me to do this legal research, and I think we should change the policy and have groups of them do that because it's too much burden. Then he tells you he's got over 24 attorneys working for you, him, and there's 11 of you. That's 2 attorneys apiece to handle any of your legal questions. Is he really an employee of yours, or do you work for him? He practically led that retreat, as did the city manager. I sat there because under your rules, I wasn't allowed to speak, but I certainly took a lot of notes. The attitude Mr. Stiles revealed to me is he thinks that he's not here to help you or you or you with a legal question, but he's going to make it a political where you got to get a group of people to go together before you can take a problem to him. What on earth? He works for you. Are you kidding me? No, he shouldn't get a raise. You need to start doing what others have said, mentioned here. Reduce the cost of these things and be more efficient with our money. Thank you.
The next speaker is Barbara Messner.
Mayor Dyer, I really appreciate the fact that you bully me and shut me up. I don't think that's appropriate. We're talking about, wait, with due respect, may I finish my statement to you? You did not dare say anything for the same comments that Tim Worst gave.
Ms. Messner.
So I'm asking you not to bully me when I speak, because I don't appreciate it as a female. I consider it a bully tactic, because you don't do the same thing for the same comments to anyone else. Okay, as far as the city attorney, Mark Stiles, we go way back to 31st Street. You and Rod Ingram, both of you. Y'all work for the city, not for the residents. You can only give opinions. That's why Rosemary and everyone else, they go to you for opinions. The only people that can give legal rulings, which y'all don't use, you don't use legal rulings, are the Commonwealth Attorney and Mark Herring. You came from Wilcox Savage. Jimmy B. Wood works for Wilcox Savage. The conflicts and everything that goes on in the city is outrageous. But instead of coming before y'all, instead of people recalling members of council, which is their only recourse, people just come up here and complain or put things on the record, and no one takes legal action. We need legal action to remove people who do not do their jobs and who take pay. Y'all hire who you want, so thank you.
That's all the speakers for 5B.
Okay, motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to defer to the next forum session.
Discussion? Vote,
By a vote of 8-3, you have deferred item 5B to September 3rd.
Okay, next discussion under ordinances compensation for city clerk.
We have one speaker, Virginia Wasserberg.
Good evening. I just wanted to come up here and say I'm in support of this, and I hope you don't defer this as well. Our city clerk works very hard for our city, and a 3% raise for her is well worth it. And I'm willing, as a taxpayer, to pay for that. Her and her staff, actually, they work very hard for us, and they are answering phone calls, they're responding to emails, FOIA requests, all of the above. And I did the math, a 3% raise is not really gonna raise her salary up a whole lot, but it's kind of like a cost of living. She's a city employee, and she does a good job, and she deserves it. And she deserves for you guys to give her 3% raise tonight. Thank you.
All right, so we do have other speakers now. Mrs. Marsh?
I probably talk to Amanda and her staff, every week, every other week. I get emails from them as to what's going on in city council. They keep me abreast. They are always extremely professional. Her whole team takes my calls. If I'm asking a question about your meetings or anything that's going on, and they're not 100% sure, they let me know. They call me back. And I really, really appreciate everything they do. So I want this to be a very positive, endorsement of our city clerk, Amanda Barnes, and her team. And I think she should have her raise, which is retroactive to whenever it was, if it was May or July. I'm not really sure exactly what date y'all are using, but I think it should be put through tonight, and I think it should be voted on tonight, because her and her staff work very hard, and I appreciate, and I feel as a citizen, it's a department where I get value for my taxes paid. I can't say that for every department, but I feel like for her department, It's really well done, and we are lucky that we have such dedicated people there that deal with all of us that call in to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all this week, sir.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to defer to the next formal.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Vote's open.
By a vote of 8 to 3, you've deferred item 5C to September 3rd.
Next item is J5, Part D, City Real Estate Assessor.
We have one speaker, Barbara Messner.
I'm gonna pass on this one.
Okay.
Okay,
No other speaker on 5D.
do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to defer to the next formal session.
Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, just 1 second. Mr. Tower, may I have your vote, please? Thank you. By a vote of 8 to 3, you have deferred item 5D to September 3rd.
Are there any
Okay,
speakers on?
are you speaking on the auditor?
Yes, we have a few. Mrs. Marsh is the first speaker, and then Reed Greenman is the second.
Welcome back.
Good evening again, Mayor Dyer and council members. I wanted to speak very favorably for our auditor. I've read a number of our audits, and I think he is doing an exceptional job. I was really glad that he found the problems with the Virginia Beach Development Corporation, the $4.5 million that was lost due to mismanagement. Those kind of things are very involved to locate and document, and I think they did a exceptional job doing that. He also, last year, found someone who had some irregularities, which I believe resulted in a fraud charge against an employee working in the Virginia Beach Economic Development Authority. There was something to do with using city services for personal use. So I really feel our city auditor is providing us a good return on the investment. I just wonder if we don't need another FTE or two in that staff, because there's so much to review, and he has a limited schedule based on the amount of time that has to be devoted to these things. And so I'm really lucky. I think we're really lucky that we have such a dedicated and devoted city auditor, and I think he definitely deserves his raise. I am very disappointed that we are waiting until September 3rd to discuss all these. I think this should be put through now for the people who are so dedicated, and it's your decision, but Councilmember Jones, it is disappointing because I think these people have been waiting, and I think they deserve their review and increase now. And it just means we all probably want to come back in September and speak to you all again. So, thank you.
The next speaker is Reed Greenman, and then after Mr. Greenman is Barbara Messner.
Good evening, Mayor Dyer, members of City Council. My name is Reed Greenman, and it's kind of unusual because I'm a board member of the Virginia Beach Tea Party. But I am wholeheartedly endorsing a raise for our city auditor. What he does for you is so important. I even agree with Ronna Marsh that we ought to maybe even plus up that department. There are so many things that need to be looked at in this city that are just not looked at. The Virginia Beach Development Authority, that audit just scratched the surface of what you should be doing and looking at. Lyndon does an amazing job, and he really handles his interaction with the public. And you know what? When he comes out, he tells it like it is. He doesn't hide things. He puts the facts in writing. I'm stunned when I read his reports because I'm like, wow, he just laid it all out there. You know, it's amazing. And I'm glad you made the decision to hire him. Have someone who works for you, who can oversee these things and do these independent investigations. I think he's earned more than a 3% raise. You know, I really think in his case, and as others have said, you should just go ahead and give him his raise tonight. That gentleman works for us. And as a resident and a person who pays taxes in this town, I'm happy with the money that you pay him. And he's worth more than 3% in my opinion. Thank you.
The next speaker is Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner is Tim Worsh.
Okay. I didn't sign up to speak on the city clerk because I didn't oppose, your raise. So I just want to say that you and your staff have been awesome and you work very hard. And I think some of the things that I get after hours, I just think it's terrible that anybody has to work the overtime. So I just wanted to make sure you didn't think I was opposed. And I think it's ridiculous, there's such a thing as due process, that you decide to defer when the heat is on and people come out, even though it's the vacations, people actually, are paying attention to some of this. I disagree a little bit on the city auditor. He was doing, it was like something every week, and then all of a sudden it slowed down on what he was finding. But I think it's a major conflict. He is a city employee, and he should not have been selected to work on the May 31st shooting and on the investigation. That's a major, major conflict. The city shouldn't be involved. And with all the, the King of Nepotism event, when have y'all haven't had pictures of the victims yet. You have the Neptune court, but these people, you're about to, you've already used, of the $4 million that we know of, you've already given $25,000 for the funerals. Some money's pledged, we don't really know the money, but you're about to disperse an additional approximately $64,000, which would be about $89,000 to these people, and I think there's a major conflict with giving that.
Due respect, Ms.
Do not interrupt my 3 minutes. I am on topic with the,
Keep it to the
I'm talking,
That's all I
it's
ask,
auditing.
Ms.
It's auditing. You don't interrupt other people. I know what I'm talking about. If that money's dispersed, $89,000 total to each of the 16 victims, then how are they going to have lawsuits against the city? What happened to them is worth a hell of a lot more than $89,000, and I think that.
Please keep it to the auditor, ma'am.
I am, the auditor's involved in this. I don't think he should be. Thank you.
Tim Worst?
Good evening again. For the record, I don't think I've ever come up here 3 times in one meeting. Try not to make that happen too often. In reference to the city auditor, I actually met him more than a year ago because of Bishop Sullivan, where I was coaching at the time. And he is a good man. And if one person is on this list who works and works and works, it would be that city auditor, and some of the positions that he has put in and the way he stands up to all of you and to our management, I appreciate. In fact, I like the fact that he is plain spoken. And of everybody in the city of Virginia Beach, I'm glad he's the one that's overseeing this investigation. I don't want to overlook our city clerk, who also has a great sense of humor and puts up with some of the things that I ask for and during meetings and whatnot. So that's another person that deserves a raise. There are 135 to 157 people watching online tonight. There are several people that have never been to a meeting tonight that I met before we came in. And you're deferring some of these answers. It's pitiful. These people have never come to a meeting. You're just going to defer it. I've known about this for a month or more. But you guys have no idea how that happened. It's pitiful. The people online are saying the same thing. You're deferring it. We've known. Why can't you guys make a decision? There's got to be a lot of thought put into this. One of the words used is cowardly. I know you're not a coward. I know you're not. We deserve a decision tonight. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just want to make a comment about tonight compensation to our city appointees. And I think there's, again, when I ran for office, I ran to change the system. I ran to change the status quo and not become part of it. to me, I don't know how my other council members feel, but I think I expressed this in chambers. I'm disappointed in this process. Disappointed in how we get here, we discuss salaries. I'm just disappointed in this process, and I'm not happy with it. So with that, I'll leave you with this quote. It's a quote that I live by. It's home to my heart. It's from Martin Luther King. A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. A leader chooses a destination, convinces others of the merits of taking that trip, shows them how they can get there, and then leads them on that journey. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I move to defer to the next farming session.
Okay? Okay.
Mr. Rousman? Thank you. By a vote of 8-3, you have deferred item 5E, yes, 5E to September the 3rd.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to make a comment of the 5 votes that we took tonight. I, of course, voted no on the deferral, and I do that probably for the same reason that Councilman Rouse is voting no as well, and that is we know where we're at on these issues. I wholeheartedly believe that everyone up at this dais, so I'll only speak for myself, I know where I stand on the employee compensation, and I look forward to the next vote on them.
Thank you.
No one would accuse me of being a friend of the status quo.
All right, we're moving on to J6, ordinance to appropriate $1,667,976 in fund balance and transfer $142,240 from the public utilities regular reserve rate relocation of staff.
The first speaker is Virginia Wasserberg, and then the next speaker will be Mrs. Marsh.
Good evening. I'm not opposed to this, and I'm not completely in favor of it. I guess I'm in favor of it because I know you need to do something. But what I am more interested in is in a couple of things in lines 9 and 10. It says with revenues increased accordingly, which kind of seems to me it leaves things open-ended to continue taking money out of the general fund without anyone having to come to the council, so I guess the city manager having to come to the council and ask permission to do so. I think that's a mistake to do that. But really, I checked with Miss Alice Kelly today on this because I wanted to understand what this was all about a little better. And she referred me to the Resource Management Plan Executive Summary. And on page 67 of the, fiscal year 19 and 20 Resource Management Plan Executive Summary, it says that there's this city rule there to ensure the city maintains adequate funding to address emergency needs. And while the renovation of Building 2, because let's be honest, that's what this is all about. It's $1.6 million, $800,000 of that is towards that renovation of Building 2. The ordinance says it's to demolish the interior of Building 2. And while that is an emergency need, I guess I'm a little offended. That flooding is not an emergency need, because the general fund has right now, as of June 30th, 2019, the unaudited unassigned fund balance is $119.3 million in that fund. And the residents of Windsor Woods have been waiting for over a decade to have a tide gate and a pump station that costs about $6 million. We've been waiting for over a decade. And this council decided that we needed to raise our stormwater fee and have that fee raised, and that we needed to raise property taxes for sea level rise. But there's money for those emergency needs. And I'm just offended that we can't use this fund for that emergency need. Because you know what? When those houses flood again, that hurts your bottom line of your real estate revenues to go to pay the salaries of the people in building 2.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Marsh? And after Mrs. Marsh is Barbara Messer.
Good evening again, Mayor Dyer and council. I think you should defer this motion. This is what really needs to be thought about a little bit more and set aside and looked at. If you read this, you are taking money and you are just carte blanche using $800,000 to demolish part of building 2. Has there been any community engagement on that? Have I missed that meeting? I try to get to a lot of meetings, but I must have missed that community engagement. And I think $800,000 to demolish the interior of a building is excessive. I think that's a lot of money. I would like to see the RFP on that. I'd like to know who got the contract. Was it one of our favored contractors? Who got it? It's not, I didn't read it in the description. I tried to read this over. I also read the email from Ms. Kelly. I think this should be deferred, and I think Councilmember Jones should do that. But I look at this, and I just go by what you have on here, the ordinance to appropriate $1.6 million and change to transfer money for the relocation of staff. It doesn't cost that much to relocate staff. You're misrepresenting this. To anyone who would be reading this agenda item, they would be expecting that to be the cost to pick the staff up and move them. Maybe you're moving them to Sabre Street and part of the money is for the renovation of Sabre Street, but you've bundled this all together and people can't tell where the money's going. You know I look at documents, you know I look at finance. It's really disingenuous to throw this all together and to move money out of the fund balances. As of the CAFR last year, we had $668 million in the fund balances. Of that now, according to Ms. Kelly, we have $119.3 million in unassigned balances. We could be doing some things other than raising taxes. That went up by $5 million in 1 year. You keep raising my taxes, you prioritize for things that aren't wanted, all this development that isn't got money to be maintained, but at the same time, you spend it on things that I can't even figure out on your agenda because it doesn't look like it should cost $1.6 million to relocate staff. So I ask respectfully that you defer this and really reevaluate what you're doing and provide that $800,000 contract so we know who's making all the money, because maybe we could get a better competitive contract and save a few taxpayers' dollars. Thank you.
Mr. Hanson, can you provide some clarification on that?
Sure. In accordance with our procurement rules, we're not authorized to even issue an RFP until we have sufficient funds set aside and appropriated and set aside for the purpose of going out for an RFP. So in answer to your question, we don't have a contractor yet. We do recognize the importance of relocating 4 departments to permanent locations that could be as long as 4 to 5 years. As you know, Sabre Street and planning departments moving there this week. That's why they're shut down. And hopefully next Monday they'll reopen consolidated and serving the public and the businesses and individuals that need permits. We had an RFP on the street for 50,000 square feet to support our public utilities and our public works departments. It could come in at 50,000 or increments of 25,000 for each of the departments. That build out will need funds to do that work as well. We promised to provide a full accounting of every dollar that's being spent with regards to recovery from this tragedy so that everyone can see what those dollars are. I'd like to be able to tell you what that RFP is, but we haven't gone forth, and we don't expect that to occur. There's some design money associated with doing an internal demolition because we still must maintain the electrical system, the lighting, the fire control, and the HVAC. And so there's a certain degree of engineering and design that has to go on before that RFP comes out. We're moving money in accordance with conversations that I've had, my staff, my engineering staff has had with the council, and we're just following up with the appropriate approvals to continue moving forward in our recovery efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moss?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. That was a pretty good explanation.
Oh, I'm sorry, we've got speakers yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We still have one additional speaker.
I apologize.
If we can have one speaker,
Absolutely.
John, and then
Public always comes.
you got it.
Thank you. Barbara Messner.
Good evening. There's an awful lot of money going towards this tragedy fund, and you're appropriating money, transferring money, you're relocating staff. You had online survey, and a lot of the people that responded were victims and victim families and people that were affected by this. I think it's way too soon to be making all these decisions and moving people around. There's plenty of buildings throughout the city. And as far as Sabre Street, I've already brought it up, that's, it was Seabury, now it's Collins, which is Molly Sessoms Corte. There's major conflicts with this. And as far as the work being done, if I'm not mistaken, bids, almost everybody who pays attention and speaks out knows that the bid process is a little shady, to say the least. And the same thing with RFPs, whatever. But one thing that I have an issue with, as far as the contracts for doing all these things, MEB was selected, the sports center is a CIP project, talking about flooding. You're using some of the pumps to move the flood water for the sports center to the retention pond that was for the convention center 2002. And this photo, I'd like to know why MEB and the city, who the city chose, has to have bilingual signage for their employees. I think all this contracting, subcontracting, and everything needs to be, we need to pay attention a bit more closely. Thank you.
That's all the speakers, sir.
Okay, Mr. Moss?
The point I want to make, I certainly can appreciate why the public has a sense of skepticism, and I always encourage that. I think that's always healthy. But I also understand why we can't share the in-house cost estimates and have them out to the public before people are responding to the RFP. But what I think we can do is when the contract is awarded, we can share what the in-house cost estimate was in terms of its breakdown. And we can also share the winning bids cost breakdown, because they got to provide that for each little schedule again. And then people can see the transparency of what our estimate was, what the award-winning bid was, what the deltas were. While we can't always show it up front for good reasons to protect the public, the public's competitive interest and not playing our hand. But I do think when the hand's been played, we can turn all the cards face up and we can show all the people what's done. Likewise, I think it would be helpful for the public and for us that as we make each of these transfers, that we update the CIP pages themselves and issue all the council members and the public on the website where they can see the new updated CIP projects. But I think Mr. Hanson, all fairness to him, he has been very upfront in the explanation and identifying the movements of the money. If anyone, maybe it's our fault for not communicating better to you, because that's who we work for you, about what that's working, and probably, Mr. Mayor, that's probably not a bad idea to go back like we did before. Let's walk back where we started from, where we are now, and where we still have to go. And maybe that would be good to have out here versus in the workshop room where more people would see it on the screen so they would understand that we really are trying to be good stewards as we deal with an event that we didn't want, but we can't walk away from dealing with it. Thank you.
Thank you, very good points. Okay.
Move approval of the item.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion, anybody? Vote's open.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you've approved ordinance number 6.
Okay, moving on. J7, ordinance to accept and appropriate. We'll do A first. $3 million from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services to the Office of Emergency Management, RA Victim Services, related to May 31st event.
We have one speaker, Barbara Messner.
Good evening. Yeah, $3 million from Criminal Justice Services to EMS Ray Victim Services related to May 31st event. I don't appreciate the way all of this has been handled for the victim families, and as I stated, I don't know how many of the families have gotten in touch with y'all, or because you've had the honor guard, so no one was allowed to get in touch with them. But you know, as I stated, I've looked before. These are the people that should be having input. I don't see them here. Most of them are too traumatized. Some of the money from the tragedy fund is going to travel expenses, hotel. So a lot of money is being transferred in departments where we need it for this tragedy fund. And I think the city should have, should be responsible, not the public who's paying, donating money. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Ward.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Discussion, votes open.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you've approved item 7A.
Okay, moving on to J7, Part D. $1 million from the Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT, State of Good Repair Primary Extension Program to Capital Project 2-026 Street Reconstruction to R8 Road Paving Projects.
We have one speaker, Barbara Messner.
As Reed said, there's a lot of items on this agenda, and somebody has to address them. You know, as far as road paving, I brought this up before, and I asked Rick Lohman a question. Normally, he's excellent at getting back with me. Oceana Boulevard hasn't been paved since at least the 90s. It's been patched, but it hasn't been paved. It's in horrible condition. And you have the new battery manufacturing facility. I just started. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, thank you, because I usually stay way under my 2 or 3 minutes. But most of the paving, if you look throughout the city, it's specific. It's all at the oceanfront. You repave Pacific Avenue over and over. But patching roads and, road paving, you've done 18th Street, I don't know how many times, it still floods. But the other reason I'm speaking is, you have appointments again tonight, and I'd like somebody to tell me why we're not allowed to speak on appointments at that time. Thank you.
That's all the speakers, sir.
Okay,
Move approval.
Second.
okay, votes open.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you have approved item 7B.
Okay, we're moving on to planning. Number 1, Town Center Associates 9 LLC for a special exemption of alternative compliance to multi-tenant blade sign at 4556 Commerce Street, District 4, Bayside.
The first speaker is Carter Ward, and after Mr. Ward is Barbara Messner.
Welcome.
Good evening. The sign proposal is really located along Columbus Street. This is a rear stair access to Public Plaza. And on either side of that plaza is Zyder's American Dream Theater. We have a Mexican restaurant going in on the 2nd level, and then the leasing office for the apartments above. This is at the request of the Planning Commission, or Central Business District Design Review Board, just to alert the public on where these stairs go. So I'd ask for your approval.
Thank you.
Barbara Messner?
Yeah, planning employees have been displaced. They were all in Building 2. And at first, you know, they didn't even have a place to go to. Then you moved them to 19. And now you're moving them to Sabre Street. And I see that Carolyn Smith and Mr. Cajun are here. But we haven't been able to get in touch with all these people. I think this should be deferred because we haven't been able to get in touch with planning people to discuss all these things. This is a special exemption, alternative compliance for town center. We paid for 5 of their parking garages. They get whatever they want. We pay rent, now rent for some of the people that are displaced, and we pay rent for Virginia Beach Economic Development Authority. You appoint them, and you pay for their salaries and rent. So, Mr. Moss, you usually pay attention to these things. I'd appreciate some input. Thank you.
That's all the speakers, sir.
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Vote's open.
Ms. Henley and Mr. Tower, may I have your vote again, please? Thank you. Ms. Henley, may I have your vote? Thank you. By a vote of 11 to 0, you've approved planning item number 1, Townsend Associates 9 LLC.
All right, moving on to K2 Planning, Anina Buddick Wetland Properties LLC for conditional change of zoning from R10 residential to conditional PD-H2 plan unit R10 overlay, grade 15 residential units at 5588 Moores Pond Road, District 4, Bayside. Okay, and applicant request withdrawal.
That's what the applicant's requesting, but I think we have speakers.
We have speakers.
Okay.
Yes. The first speaker is Clay Dills. And then after Mr. Dills is Joey Moore.
Welcome.
Thanks. Evening, Mr. Mayor, evening, council. The intent of the request to withdraw is solely an intent to gain more time with the community, to get together with them again, to get a better understanding about their wishes and desires, and what we're trying to do. Last week, we held a good meeting, honestly, a very open and frank discussion was had over there. That was just late last week. And so our goal with this is solely to be able to go back to them, figure out some common ground, some way to work together on this, and I appreciate your consideration.
Appreciate that initiative, thank you.
Joey Moore. And then the next speaker after Mr. Moore is Bradley Smith.
Pardon my casual appearance here tonight, but
that's
Mr. Mayor, council, I appreciate being here for a few minutes. I'm a lifelong resident of this great city. I grew up at 356 South Newtown Road on a family dairy farm. Across the boulevard, North Virginia Beach Boulevard, at the end of Moores Pond Road, sits the Webb-Moore house. It happens to be on my Uncle Herbert's dairy farm at the time. Not only did he raise a big family there, but he milked over 100 cows a day, twice a day, 7 days a week. Some of my family members are here tonight. They are out of the area, one as far as out of state. We want to vote tonight. Those buildings are still intact. The original farm milking barn, the milking parlor, the silos, associated buildings that were on that property, although they're not in their original state, when this was passed on to the state after my aunt's demise, it came with certain covenants, restrictions, and the Historical Department of Virginia accepted the property. No one knew they were going to dispose of it at some time in the future. The person who bought this property was well aware of the covenants, the restrictions, and it was purchased, and they've been able to use the property. They have a successful landscaping business. They have income derived from that property, from housing and other areas within that property. And we don't want to see this can kicked down the road any longer than tonight. Yes, the company has had a meeting last week, of which some of the family attended. I don't think there's any other discussion here. It's a contract. There's legal covenants and restrictions on this property. It would not only save the family having to make another trip back here next month or next year if they come with some proposal, but what we're saying is deal with it tonight. It should be denied. It will save the current owner the expense and time of hoping to do something with this property in the future, and it's clear cut. They need to work with the historical board. I don't care if it's zoned agricultural, R10, PDU, whatever. You can't build homes on that property. I appreciate y'all taking into consideration this tonight, hearing the rest of the family, and see where we go with it. Thank you.
Question to the city attorney, what is the legal difference between a withdrawal and a denial?
If it is withdrawn, it can be brought, it can be, well, let me go the other way. If you deny it tonight, a substantially similar application cannot be filed for 1 year. If it is simply withdrawn, that prohibition does not apply.
Okay. So after a year, it could, something could come back.
Yes.
Ms. Henley.
But let me also ask, but if an application that is substantially different is developed, could it be submitted in less than a year?
Yes, a substantially different application could come forward, and you have delegated in the code the decision on whether it is substantially similar or not to your planning director.
See, that's what I think everybody needs to understand. That a substantially.
Can't hear.
A substantially.
I think there's a mic problem, folks. Apologies.
Okay, but if it's substantially the same, it could not come back for a year, but it could come back in a year. If it's substantial, if there is an application drawn up that is substantially different, it could come back within less than a year.
Yes, ma'am, that is a correct statement of your
And
ordinance.
that's important that everybody understands. This isn't a forever thing. But I think what we might need to see is what this contract was and the covenants that were with the Department of Historic Resources, because they are the ones that enforce that easement. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is their responsibility to enforce the legal requirements of the easement document. That would be, your planning review is separate from that issue.
Right. But I would really like to, see that, and I thought we were going to get some kind of response from them from their July meeting, but we don't seem to have that.
My understanding, and Mr. Tahan can correct me if I'm incorrect, but I don't think they made a decision at the July meeting. I think they're going to take it up again in September. Is that correct?
That is correct. DHR is taking the additional information. They had asked the applicant to provide additional information at that July meeting, and they have not made any decision that we've been informed of.
Mr. And I apologize for sidetracking, but I just thought before the speakers came up, I wanted to make sure that people were aware of the difference between a denial and a withdrawal. So so they understand what could and could not happen. So I didn't mean to short circuit
No,
it, but I just
that's a good point.
thought it was important that people understand that.
Great. Back to the speakers.
Sure. The next speaker is Bradley Smith, and after Mr. Smith is Patty Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Could somebody tell me how these lights work?
So, in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the yellow line.
Okay, so if there's
Yeah.
somebody going to come get me if it's red?
No.
All right,
Possibly.
thank you. So, thank you for the time tonight. My family and I only recently learned of the owner's intent to try to develop the property. In the last 2 weeks, it's been a whirlwind of information among me and my cousins. I want to acknowledge that my Aunt Judy is here, my cousin Pam, my brother Mickey, Joey Moore, who already came up, and all of my cousins are very interested in what this property, or what the disposition of this property is. I hope the council members know that the Webb-Moore house is the oldest house in the state of Virginia. When my grandmother was very ill, she was terminally ill, she put together a trust with specific instructions because her and the family saw the value of this property. The instructions to protect the Webb-Moore house and the surrounding buildings and setting to retain it in a pastoral setting is clearly documented in the historical easement that is listed for this property, and as someone mentioned, should be enforced by the DHR. I want the council members to know that it has not been enforced by the DHR. If you go visit the property today, you will find that there's multiple rental properties on the site. You'll find that even the Webb-Moore house has been added to, a historic colonial brick home, has an addition on it with wood lap siding. It's shocking that they were allowed to do that. You guys are in the distinct position to protect this asset that we have in the city of Virginia Beach. On the meeting that Mr. Dills mentioned, it was a productive meeting. I was at that meeting with my mother, who wasn't able to meet tonight, and the outcome of the meeting was the neighbors and the family were resolute in opposing any development and questioning why was the occupant allowed to make the changes she's made. It should not be done. So I hope that you'll take interest in it. We've asked for a vote tonight, so we don't have to continue coming back. This is multiple deferrals that have happened if you've looked into this. Our cousins have sent, I hope every council member has received the letter that me and my cousins drafted and signed with concerns about the property. And you don't have to dig very far to find out what's been done with that property, and it was never our grandmother's intent. On that Tuesday night meeting, the owner mentioned a legacy. I thought about that, and she said that her intent was to develop the property and leave a legacy to her children and grandchildren. I'm sorry, but that legacy was already contemplated by our grandmother for all the citizens of Virginia Beach, as well as the state with this oldest house in Virginia. So thank you for your time.
Patty Dutton. And then the next speaker will be Anita Downs.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Patty Dutton, and I live on Webland Farm Road. I'm requesting that you stand with our neighborhood and the original donor's family and reject the withdrawal and vote to deny this rezoning application for planned development. You have already told us that you're not in favor of development on this property. Take a stand for what is right for this one-of-a-kind historic property in our city that should already be protected by a perpetual easement. As cities of Virginia Beach, this is our process too. We have participated in each step with all of her requested deferrals, which have been going on for almost a year. Planning Department, Planning Commission, and now City Council, for the applicant to withdraw this application at the same time that she is promoting to our neighborhood another similar development which would require PDH2 zoning is wrong. The applicant's professionals have said that this is the only way for the owner to be able to maintain this property. This simply is not true. The latest stewardship report from the DHR, which documents the condition of the historic property, shows the main historic house is in good shape for its age. There are no serious concerns documented. The report also stated that the owner, quote, continues to want to amend the easement, unquote, in order to accomplish her development plans. There are other ways to generate funds to help maintain a historic property They are just not what she wants to do with this property that she has bought for a substantially reduced price and has enjoyed tax credits for over 20 years. The owner appears to have two current city violations, a zoning violation and a permit violation. There are multiple rental units right now. Send a message to the state that planned development is not right for this historic property, our historic property. Please vote to deny the zoning application for planned development in the middle of our single-family neighborhood. Thank you.
Anita Downs?
Welcome.
Members of City Council, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name's Anita Downs, and I'm one of the original homeowners on Webland Farm Road. While I appreciate that the applicant has requested to withdraw the application for rezoning, I'm asking that you deny that request for withdrawal. When speaking of the applicant, I'm speaking not only of Anina Buddig, the applicant on record, but also the driving force behind this development plan, her mother, Gian Peterson, who has retained the architect, the consultants, the legal counsel, and now the PR firm for this project. The applicant is asking to withdraw this plan, which includes 15 units, but in a meeting last Thursday, the neighborhood was presented with a new plan, which is not substantially different. It's essentially the same, but with 7 larger dwellings instead of 15. It will still have a co-op ownership and will still need your approval to rezone. This plan, the previous plan, and all the plans submitted to DHR over the past decade violate the perpetual historic easement on the property and the wishes of the donor, Dorothy Moore. Every one of her plans are not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood and will ruin the pastoral setting that Dorothy Moore wanted to retain as part of her gift to the state. So hold on to those binders because you're going to need them for the applicant's next sales pitch. This applicant is asking you for special treatment in granting the PDH2 rezoning while currently is in violation of the easement and zoning laws. The owner has had up to 4 renters at a time on the property and illegally modified the guest house into a duplex without the proper permits. The owner purchased the property at a substantial discount, knowing what the restrictions and the maintenance costs would be, and has been enjoying tax breaks and illegal rental income over the last 2 decades. Now she wants to make even more money on the property by building a multifamily development. Please do not reward this bad behavior. My neighbors and I have been fighting this both here and at the state for almost a year now. This applicant keeps withdrawing and deferring her applications, wasting not only our time and money, but the cities and states as well. It's time to stop this here and now. This city council communicated to us in June that you are not in favor of this development. Instead of allowing this application to be withdrawn, I'm asking you to vote to deny the original request to rezone. A denial to rezone our neighborhood will send a clear message to the applicant that the city of Virginia Beach does not think any plan, which includes additional dwellings, is the right type of development for the Webland property, the neighborhood, or the city of Virginia Beach. It's time to stop wasting our time and money with any plans. And I would just like to add that I have over 40 neighbors that have come out tonight, and I'd like them to stand, please.
Very much appreciate it.
That's all the speakers, sir.
The applicant has a right for rebuttal.
Would the applicant like a rebuttal?
Mr. Dills?
Thank you. The applicant, my direction has been to let's do this in good faith. Let's work with the community in good faith. The objective here is to continue to do that. That's why the request was made. That's why I'm here before you today, and it continues to be the case.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Mr. Mayor, I have seen the alternate plan that the applicant has presented, or had planned on presenting. We can't hear. I say I have seen the alternate plan that the applicant had planned on presenting eventually, and it is not substantially different than what was presented in the first place. And I was opposed to that particular plan. I'm opposed to the revised plan, and I'm going to move for denial.
Second.
Rosemary and then John.
Well, I really enjoyed meeting with all of the neighbors. I hope you can hear me. And I started the Historic Preservation Commission 9 years ago, and this is the oldest house in Virginia. And if this is not prime for something for historic preservation, there isn't anything more prime than that. And I think it's very important that we stand behind historic preservation.
What I want assurances of now is that now that we are denying this, I want those non-conforming uses, they should be getting a cease and desist notice to stop that, what we didn't stop before, because it was. There were structures that were built that they did not secure permits from. I want to know why we can't have cause to have them to remove the structures themselves. I would like to see the attorney working with planning to tell us how that happens or why it cannot happen.
Okay.
And also, I think it would be very helpful if we saw the document with the conditions and so forth that the state holds, so that we will know what is supposed to be there and what isn't. I think maybe the fact that we haven't seen that, it's been confusing to us.
Okay, thank you.
I think we need to see it.
Okay, anyone else? Discussion? Vote is open. Okay.
I think the state.
Is there somebody else would like to speak?
Right here,
Yes, sir.
right here.
Judy Moore.
My
Okay.
name is Judith Moore, and I,
Please, at the end, make sure you give your contact info, after you finish
Go
speaking.
ahead and speak, ma'am.
I
Yeah.
lived my
Go to the
whole
podium, please.
growing up years on Moore's Farm. My father was Herbert Scooty Moore. I don't know if anybody remembers him. Great man. There's a couple of things about the house, about the property, and I'm nervous. But there are some graves on the property. There are two I remember. There's also Ebenezer Church had a graveyard on the property. There was also an Indian reservation on the property. My father would plow the field, it would rain, and the grinding stones would appear. They were the Chesapeake Indians. They're extinct now. There's so much about that property that is precious, should be saved for posterity. Please don't let anything happen to it. My mother, this is the original. Does anybody have a copy?
We'll get you a copy. We'll submit a copy to the
This is the original. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I think we're ready for the vote.
By a vote of 11-0, you've denied the application.
K3, Princess Anne Hotel LLC, City of Virginia Beach, for modification of properties at the northeast intersection of Princess Anne Road and Community College Place, District 1, Centerville.
The first speaker is Conrad Sventer, and the second speaker is Barbara Messner.
Earlier this year, I spoke to you on this topic.
Okay, hold on one second. We'll just wait for the crowd to clear a little bit out of respect to you, Conrad.
I think it's probably good.
Okay, thank you.
Earlier this year, I spoke to you on this topic, and unlike the Bonnie Road project, I support the Princess Anne Hotel concept that Councilwoman Wooten is so greatly helping along. I still support this project and support this request passing through. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the applicant did not sign up for Princess Anne Hotels, just so you're aware. I just wanted to make sure you understood that. The next speaker is Barbara Messner.
With 4 and 5.
Those have already been approved on consent. You didn't sign up for those.
Okay.
So, Princess Anne Hotel?
Yes?
Yeah, I was shocked that they're putting a hotel here. It's like tourism is spreading all over the city, and we subsidize the hotel industry. This is in Centerville District. But I really appreciate all the speakers. It looks like 40 is the magic number, plus people having specific information. It's like you denied one thing, but you didn't deny anything else. So you're kind of selective in what you deny and approve. And thank you for correcting the numbers.
That's all the speakers unless the applicant is here. Not
Ms.
signed
Wooten?
up.
I move that you approve this item.
Second.
Okay, vote's open. Thank you.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you've approved planning item number 3.
And thank you for your good work on this
Oh, no, thank you.
one. No, you, no, you got it. All right, we're moving on to K6, ordinance to add section 223.02 and amend section 501 of the city zoning ordinance, CZO, rate assembly uses in residential zoning districts.
The first speaker is Benita Barger. And the next speaker is Deborah Partington.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It's hard to see how this ordinance has reached this point. Let's be objective. The proposal was made in order for conditional use permit applicants to skirt around the requirements and challenges that would come into play with an appropriate commercial zoning. The 9 conditions that are recommended by planning are vague and unrestricted, so as to allow a venue in a citizen's backyard, causing a multitude of nuisances and jeopardizing the safety and well-being of your constituents. There are no restrictions or limitations on music, lighting, the use of generators, the number of attendees, and this would allow over 150 events a year. To allow an outdoor assembly area and parking to be as close as 50 feet from a shared property line is unacceptable. Would any of you be happy if you were retreating to your backyard deck or porch with your young children or your grandchildren and on a summer night, and you're met by loud music filled with abusive and possibly crude lyrics, noise from generators, aromas from food trucks, glaring spotlights and headlights, and high levels of background noise. Also, this ordinance does not take into account the zoning of the abutting or adjacent properties. For instance, I live in a planned community, and my home is R5D, and it is adjacent to a property that is applying for a CUP. The density of an adjacent or adjoining neighborhood needs to be considered, don't you think? Lastly, are you aware that by passing the ordinance, you are allowing conditional use permits to bypass codes in place to protect the public? Essentially, you have commercial use of property because it is zoned residential, and the commercial codes relating to public safety are overlooked, instead defaulting to residential codes. There is no other way to put it. This is an abuse of the application of zoning powers and principles. It appears the city staff and the Planning Commission have failed in their duty to vet this for what it is, a commercial endeavor in a residentially zoned neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Deborah Partington. And after Mrs. Partington is Barbara Messner.
Welcome.
Thank you, Your Honorable Mayor, council people. I threw out half my speech after I heard the wetlands, and I'll tell you why in a moment. I am opposed to the ordinance pertaining to assembly uses in residential zoning district for the following reasons. First off, it's important to understand how many homeowners are going to meet the criteria of this ordinance, which requires a property to be listed on a historic register and shall be at least 3 acres in size. When asked this question, Mr. Kemp of the Planning Commission said, and I quote, "It's a relatively small number that would be eligible for this. It is my feeling that council should represent the best interests of the city as a whole, not the special interests of a few people. The fact that passing this ordinance would negatively impact hundreds of homeowners surrounding these properties should override the special interest and preferential treatment of a handful of homeowners." Again, I quote Mr. Kemp, who says, quote, "Allowing assemblies would provide a revenue stream for the property owners to keep the house in good shape, to keep the property and maintain these historic properties." So the purpose of this ordinance is to allow homeowners of historic properties an income flow, to keep up the property and prevent it from being torn down or fall into disrepair. Now, how ironic it is that the Webland residents are facing the same situation as those of the Sajjo Farm homeowners. You have an owner of a historic property that wants to change zoning or get approval of an ordinance for income purposes. When you buy a property like this, you know going in that there's expenses in restoration and upkeep. Now, I don't want to see anyone suffer financial hardship, but that's their business. And I and my neighbors should not have to suffer the consequences and sacrifice our peaceful enjoyment of our neighborhood for the benefit of a few people who were lucky enough to begin with, who could afford to purchase 3 acres in a historic home. So the second reason I oppose this ordinance is that it will allow a major commercial enterprise within a residential neighborhood at the expense of neighbors. I sincerely hope I'm not wasting my time talking to you or yours because your mind is already made up, but that you will truly, truly consider what I'm saying before you make a vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Barbara Messner. And after Mrs. Messner will be Eddie Burdon.
Good evening. Those are excellent speakers. They make excellent points. I mean, this whole thing of residential neighborhoods, down at the north end, you have block parties, Croatan, which is, I was going to speak on that, closing the roads, closing beach access. Everything's commercial. Our parks are advertised to tourists. Everything's geared more towards dog parks than children's parks. Everything's commercial. Everything's for money. And we pay a lot of taxes on everything. And you shouldn't be amending city codes. Their codes are in place for a reason. And you just constantly amend them for developers and for just nonstop commercialization. Our homes are supposed to be our castles. It's supposed to be peaceful enjoyment. So I hope you'll pay attention to these two excellent speakers like you did the 40 speakers from the other property. Thank you.
Ready for Dawn?
Welcome, Mr. Burgott.
Good evening, Mayor Dyer, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council. There's an application that follows this for the Sajjo Manor Guest House, and we've requested that that item be indefinitely deferred, and I believe it's in the best interest of the scores of supporters of the request on the Sajjo Manor Guest House, and I think the city as a whole, that this be deferred as well. The property this gives rise to is over 12 acres in size. It was part of a very large farm, and it has been extremely well maintained. At y'all's pre-briefing 2 weeks ago, there were some questions that were raised, and I had a vacation scheduled and left town. But the very next day before I left, I talked to Kay Wilson in the city attorney's office about some of the questions. When I returned, I immediately got in touch with the staff about going back and getting the historical records of all the rezonings that have taken place on the Sajjo property. And they have a list of those. They're pulling them, but because of the move and the stuff being boxed, there was no chance of getting answers that the questions you all asked about in time for anyone to know for this meeting. So we wrote a letter to all the council, to Ms. Barnes. We let the homeowners association know. We already had a large meeting with them many months ago, and as I said, scores and scores of folks support this application. There are a handful of folks who do not, and that's their prerogative. But the best thing so that council doesn't waste a lot of its time and energy would be to indefinitely defer this along with the companion application that follows it. The other alternative, which we thought to do when we were going down this road, is similar to what in fact, my clients are the ones who suggested to Mr. Kellum that he do what he did with his property after they were already in this process, and he's gotten all the way through the process. So it's something you need to hear. You all have an ability to make the decision with all the facts. I certainly think the right thing to do is to indefinitely defer this along with the Sajjo application that's also on your agenda tonight, as we requested and as everyone was advised was going to take place. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Burgott.
That's all the speakers for item number 6.
All right. Do we have a motion on?
Second.
Motion for deferral?
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion,
I just
Mr.
have
Moss.
discussion. I think it's important when we look at this kind of, whether we do this or not, it should never be directly associated with the specific application that's before us, but this should be judged on its merits as whether or not, as independent of any application coming before us, is this good land use policy? I think to put these things together, Nexus, puts the appearance that we're drafting something that's either in support of or against a specific application. So these things should be separate. I personally don't like it, I'll just be honest with you up front, but we should not be creating the strong nexus by linking these applications together, because it undermines the public's trust that we are looking at the public interest and it's independent of any application before us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moss. Ms. Henley?
Well, I followed the Kellum property, and I'm not exactly sure what the basis for approval of that was, if this didn't allow it at that time. Maybe it's the zoning that they have, because I think it is a very similar thing. And so in some places it works, but in other places it doesn't. I just, in reading some of these conditions, it seemed to me like they were not strong enough. I really
think this needs a whole lot of work, and I agree with Mr. Moss. I don't think it should come with one specific application in mind, because we would have to look at this as something that would be able to be used in any residential district. Of course, a conditional use permit allows us to put other conditions on too, but some of these conditions I don't think are really appropriate, so we can defer it and work on it some more, because I do recognize that historic properties, and there, I know we just finished that survey in the northern part of the city, and there are quite a few, and we're just starting the survey in the southern part of the city where there will be quite a few, and so I think the uses will come up more and more, but this seemed pretty loose. So, anyway, that was my impression of it, but I really don't like seeing it connected to one specific application. I think, we have to look at the fact that this would be applied to any historic property.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Vote's open.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you deferred this item number 6 indefinitely.
Okay, the last item under planning is K7, Rayburn Sajjo LLC, conditional use permits, area assembly use, Sajjo Farm, District 2, Kempsville.
Eddie Verdon?
Again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Eddie Burdon, Virginia Attorney representing the applicant. This application, which, as Ms. Henley just alluded to, is recommended with 21 conditions. We could have, because the amount of acreage that my clients own with the manor house and the guest house, we could have sought to zone the property back to agriculture and come in for the use permit. So agriculture, you allow it, and it's 12 and a half acres of property. So this was just an avenue. We discussed it with staff as to which way they thought was the better way to go, but we're not trying to connect. We're trying to get, and we'll talk about it when this comes up. I don't want to waste council's time tonight, but request that it be indefinitely deferred for the reasons I've already spoken about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burdon. Okay.
Ann Crenshaw? And after Ms. Crenshaw is Benita Barger.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council. As you can see, I didn't expect to be here today. I expected to be sitting at my desk catching up on work, but I was retained this afternoon to represent an adjoining landowner, Mrs. Pamela Robinson, who opposes this application, and I would support the motion to indefinitely defer this going forward.
Thank you very much.
Benita Barger. And then after Ms. Barger is William Griggs.
Welcome.
Hello again. So last week, we were advised that the owners of Webb-Moore Sajjo LLC had asked for the indefinite deferral. It's my hope that they've come to realize the impact such a venture will have on the neighboring communities. A venture hosting 40 outdoor events of 150 attendees in a community's backyard is not what I think of as home sweet home. I don't know about you. As you know, my objection to the ordinance for rezoning in the residential areas and this CUP is based upon information provided to me by licensed professional civil engineers. What is disheartening is the many representations provided to planning personnel by the applicant. First was the roadway leading to the guest house, and its safety implications have been ignored. The easements and the ownerships of the road are still in question. Second was the infamous gate, the gate that leads from the farm to the common area of Sajjo Farm condominiums. This gate goes nowhere except to our common area and cannot be used as an access. Third is the misinformation regarding activities that are allowed in our community. Here's a copy of the Sajjo Farm documents and rules. These rules are much more restrictive than the conditions that are associated with this cup. Least you remember, we are a private community with private streets that are patrolled by private security. As I've expressed in my letters to you, public safety for our community as well as the patrons of a venue is utmost important to me. I've discussed the fire safety with regards to the roadway, the heavily wooded site with no public water, no fire hydrant, and a house with no sprinkler system. Lastly, my question is, how sure are we that a response to an active shooter at this venue would allow for a rapid enough response to prevent harm to the guests at the venue as well as the neighboring community? Should an incident occur, will you as public servants have done all that is needed to ensure the safety of your constituents? Thank you.
William Griggs. And after Mr. Griggs is Edward Everett. Edward Everett.
You sure you don't need a 10-minute stretch? Hello, my name is Bill Griggs. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council for listening to me this evening. I'm a realtor as well, and a lot of the information I want to give you is coming directly from that. I've already emailed this to you. You should have pictures and everything in front of you so that you'll sort of have an idea of what I see out my backyard. I'm requesting that you do not approve the application for Draybun Sajjo LLC that is before you prior to the petition for the withdrawal of the same. Here are my reasons. Our home plus 3 neighbors' homes all have master bedrooms and main living areas between 35 to 55 feet from the single-lane gravel egress known as Sajjo Farm Road. Our combined Virginia Beach city assessment for these 4 homes is $1,563,500. Our total estimated resale value as today of these 4 homes is $1,783,753. Now, we did not purchase our homes to be next to an egress road for a commercial enterprise, by no means. If the application before you is approved, our home values will decline rapidly due to noise, traffic, and the lack of personal privacy. Approval will change the pleasant living environment of Sajjo Farm that we paid dearly for. Additional traffic noise by vendors alone the day before and the day after the events, which totals 3 trips per vendor, equals to 120 days of noise. It is estimated that the number of trips to and from the off-site parking area by the 12-passenger van that they are considering, at a minimum of 38 trips per event, that's 76 passes behind our homes per event on a single-lane gravel road within a 4-hour time period. Traffic will continue by vendors and their staff after 9 p.m. And like you, I should be home in bed at this time after 9 p.m. I'm respectfully asking the Virginia Beach City Council to vote no on the Draybun LLC proposal that was before you. And just like Mr. Moss says, I believe that the part that came before you, that proposal, it's being tailor-made for this particular situation to come back in another form. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Edward Everett. Is he not here? Thank you. And Deborah Partington.
Welcome back.
Thank you. My name is still Deborah Partington. I will be brief, and I'll try not to be repetitive. I'd like to ask, where are the scores and scores of residents that are in favor of this CUP? I don't see them anywhere. I saw tons of residents at Webland to support their position, and the reason you don't see more people from Sajjo Farms Homeowners Association to oppose this, you just see Ms. Barger and myself and Mr. Griggs, is that 90% or more of the residents in Sajjo Farms did not receive proper notice of the planning commission meeting, and I brought that up to the planning commission. I said, you need to delay the vote because nobody knows about this, but they went ahead and voted anyway. And they don't know what's going on. And our board is staying neutral, is not taking a position, therefore homeowners don't know about this, that's why they're not here. So I'm here to represent them and to oppose the CUP for the following reasons. Let me give you a little background information, and I'm gonna be real quick. The city of Virginia Beach once owned the subject property, and they were not able to use this road or to use the property because of ingress and egress issues with the road leading in. It's a 14-foot wide, single lane gravel road that doesn't meet federal code. Now, if there was a way around it, you would think that the city would have taken it and used the property as a source of income for the city or as a public park for people to enjoy. But it could not be done then, and it could not be done now, because it is still the same road with no changes. This CUP should not be granted today or at a future date. Saturday night, August 3rd, there was a shooting in the Sajjo Farms neighborhood directly adjacent to the Bunch's property, the subject property. Thank God nobody was hurt. And so I need to point out that allowing assemblies for 150 people with no escape route, only one way in and one way out, in the event of an emergency, a heart attack, a fire, a shooting, would be negligent. Emergency vehicles and police would have to maneuver down a quarter-mile, single-lane gravel road with two 90-degree turns, and if there's cars exiting or entering, and no ability to pull over, contrary to what the Bunch's attorney claims, because the majority of the road is bound on one side by Lake Lawson and the other side with heavy woods. My time is up. So in closing, please remember two major reasons to disapprove this application that cannot be overcome or washed away. The obstacle of the road, that will always be a single-lane road with ingress and egress issues for emergency vehicles, as well as guest vehicles arriving and departing. And secondly, our city's comp plan that states that the city will maintain our neighborhood's integrity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Please make a note of what those comments were. We'll deal with them when this comes back up. But the idea that their people aren't here from the neighborhood because they weren't notified is fabrication. We had a very well-attended meeting, about 60 people with the neighborhood. It's been on their website for months and months and months. So that's just a fabrication. The road issue we will address when this comes back. That's one of the reasons we're getting all the information, all the facts. And the shooting she's referring to did not happen on or about my client's property. It happened in the middle of the neighborhood. So just to be clear, thank you.
Jessica?
I have a comment and a question for planning. How is notice provided to the neighborhood?
Adjacent properties are notified in accordance with state law requirements.
So when we look at that map, all of that makes like an L, all of those properties were notified?
Correct.
Via mail?
Yes.
I have a couple concerns, but I've been trying to work with various residents who have reached out to me. I've spoken with the applicant's representation, and I would make a motion to defer this. I think there are a lot of questions. I think there are a lot of answers that we can get, and I would personally like to have the time to find more consensus, because I am getting conflicting information from a variety of sources, and I would appreciate personally the time to try to hammer that out.
Second.
Vote is open.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you deferred indefinitely planning item number 7.
Okay, we're gonna go to appointments.
Mr. Mayor, I move for I nominate the following individuals to the Agricultural Advisory Commission: Diane Horsley, to the Historic Preservation Commission, Caroline Dixon, high school student, and Rachel McGraw, high school student. To the Public Library Board, Robert G. Hoffheimer Jr. To the Virginia Beach Community Development Corporation, Brandon Hutchins.
Okay, vote is open.
Do we have a second?
A second on it?
No, you don't need to.
You don't need a second.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you appointed those named by Vice Mayor.
Okay, any old business?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I do.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, we heard from several people who were here that they had trouble hearing. And at their request, and it wasn't long ago that I was sitting in the back of the room, and I also had trouble hearing. And at their request, I asked that some improvements be made to the audio inside the chamber. And I believe that it may have been, but I think we still have work to do. People take time out of their lives and they're away from their families to be here to make their opinions heard and to witness the discussions that occur here that impact their lives. And they have a right to be heard. So I would like to again request that the sound be addressed inside the chambers. I think it's of utmost importance.
I did that, I got that.
Okay, very good point. Okay, yes.
I would just respond by saying, I believe our last sound issue was from the podium as people spoke. Clearly, we're having an issue on this side. I heard you loud and clear. We just have to figure out how to turn it up, and some of us will pull away, not be so protecting so that we can hear those that don't speak as loud as we can do, and I will look into it.
Can I just add one? One of the other things I got, Dave, was people said the closed captioning is not working correctly. So if we could also look into that in conjunction, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, two very good points. Okay, any new business? We are adjourned. Thank you.